Thank you, Linda. I think we're all set to call the meeting of the Board of Investments to order for Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. Can you please call the roll to confirm attendance?
Yes, I'm going to do the opening statement.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Knox. Meeting is being conducted as a virtual meeting, so I will do a roll call of the trustees to confirm the attendance. Mr. Green?
Here, present.
Thank you. Mr. Santos?
Old president, I found the floor.
Mr. Keel?
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Greenwood?
I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Oakham?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Bernstein?
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez?
Here.
Thank you. And Chair Knox?
I am here as well.
Thank you. Staff participating in the meeting include the following: Chief Investment Officer John Grable, CEO Santos Freeman, Chief Counsel Stephen Rice, Principal Investment Officers Jude Perez, Bache Masarajian, Jim Rice, Ted Wright, Chris Wagner, Senior Investment Officers Scott Drazel and Chad Timko, Investment Officers Kwok Win and Daniel Joy, Senior Investment Analyst John Kim and Calvin Chang, Interim Chief Financial Officer Ted Granger, Michael Herrera and Jill Reboff, Legal Office. Consultants participating in the meeting include James Walsh, Stephen Kennedy, and Mark White from Alborn, Jose Fernandez and Natalie Walker from Stone Group, Leo Faustino, Stephen McCourt, Alina Wan, and Tim Filler from Makita Investment Group. And we have Garen Getman and Kelly Liang from the Olson Remcho. Trustees, if you have a comment or question on any item, please use the Zoom chat option to be placed in the queue, or you may contact me directly. At this time, we ask all meeting participants to mute their mics until you're ready to speak. Now we may proceed with the agenda.
Thank you very much, Linda. Item number 2, approval of the minutes. I would note that the February minutes had 2 corrections. The first stating that the meeting was called to order virtually rather than in the boardroom. And then item number 6, the CIO report repeated Mr. Kryman and CEO report from number 5. So we just need to switch that to Mr. Grable and the CIO report. And unless there are any other corrections.
I'll move approval.
Move approval,
Second.
is there a second? Okay, moved by Mr. Kelly, second by, I believe, Mr. Kehoe. Any discussion? Please call the roll, Linda.
Mr. Green?
Aye. I was the one that seconded it, by the way, too.
Oh, Mr. Green, good
Okay.
morning, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Santos?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood?
Aye.
Mr. Oakham?
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez?
Yep.
And Chair Knox?
Yes,
Okay, the motion passed unanimously.
thank you. Item number 3, report on closed session items. And I know our report on closed session items from the last meeting was published and is available on LACERA.com. Nothing to add beyond that, Mr. Rice? Other than the fact you're muted?
Excuse me, we do have one prior board action that will be included in the report that will be posted today.
Okay, thank you very much. We are on to item 4, public comments. And I know, Linda, you sent 2 batches of written public comment via email to the trustees last night and today. We also have 22 people signed up for public comment this morning. Can you please call on each of them in order?
Absolutely. I will start off by calling on Michael Ginn.
Yes, good morning. Greetings and salutations. How's everybody doing? My name is Michael Gwynn, and to the members of the pension fund involved in the sale of the Crenshaw Mall, Deutsche Bank, DWS, and local elected officials who may be on the line. My name is Michael E. Gwynn, the chapter president of the Association of Black Social Workers, as well as a LACERA member and retiree. Our organization has been around since 1968 and has taken up the mantle of empowerment of the individual and community. ABSWGLA is committed to what is right and good for the community. This is why we strongly support this bid to purchase Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall through Crenshaw Rising. The Los Angeles Black community has been in its own right for its own future, as displayed by the historic fundraising accomplished in less than 60 hours. There is a national groundswell of financial support for Black community ownership of the Crenshaw Mall. The many donors, coupled with the teams and thousands in the community who have signed petitions over the past several months, reflect a broad base of support for a new model of economic development that uplifts instead of uproots the community. I said the community. Since its establishment in May of 2020, Downtown Crenshaw Rising has been the only group that has conducted an inclusive process of meetings and expressed an intent of unifying the entire community. The broad coalition of over 300 community-based organizations, neighborhood associations, civil rights organizations, my organization, elected officials, merchants, property owners, and business leaders and artists supporting Downtown Crenshaw Rising is unprecedented. Check the history books. It speaks to the power of the moment and the development team. We've been doing the work. We respectfully ask that you allow Downtown Crenshaw Rising to help cure this challenge for the respective pension funds by placing this critical Black community asset into the hands of trusted, capable, tested community leaders who will build community-centered development. Your representative, Deutsche Bank DWS, has tried traditional development unsuccessfully repeated. We will not go away. Direct them to give the community a chance. Allow Downtown Crenshaw Rising the opportunity to directly present all parties with a win-win situation. Everybody can win with our plan and our track history of involvement and fundraising. And make your funds and the nation proud at this time. Sincerely yours, Michael A. Gwynn. I thank you for your time this morning. I yield the floor back at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Gwynn. Next speaker, Linda.
And next we will call on Veronica Sands. Veronica, please enter *6 to unmute yourself. Veronica. Good
Yes.
morning, Veronica. You begin now.
Pardon me?
You can begin your comment.
Oh, good morning. My name is Veronica Sanse. And excuse me, can the board hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. Again, my name is Veronica Sanse, and I have been a resident in the Baldwin Hills, Leimert Park, Crenshaw community for over 30 years since relocating back after I graduated from college and living in a couple of other cities. I am also a member of Downtown Crenshaw Rising. I am one of 67,000 renters that will be highly displaced if the sale goes through to the gentrifier speculator realtors and not to Downtown Crenshaw Rising. I am here this morning to request that you sell the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall exclusively to us. Us meaning the community, us meaning Downtown Crenshaw Rising. We have shown the board how serious we are as a community-led organization within the last 10 months. We made the same offer that LiveWorks bid was accepted for last year, but the board awarded the bid to them and they did not come up or have the money at the time to close the deal. But we did. And now here we are 10 months later, and you still refuse us to accept us as real players of this game, of this deal. You gave us less than a week to submit our latest bid, and I do believe we raised the money, cash money, in less than 72 hours. Mike said it was less than 60, and I really believe it was 48 hours. We have the money, and I personally feel that the board is not playing fair where Downtown Crenshaw Rising is concerned. You seem to be not taking us seriously, and we have shown you and other potential speculator gentrifiers that we mean business. It appears to me, and again, this is my personal opinion, that the board is not interested at all in dealing with us and seeing our Black community as potential owners of this mall. It appears to me that the board is guilty of systemic racism like the rest of America. And you are guilty of continuing to keep your knee on our necks. We demand that you sell the mall to us exclusively. We have the money, and like Live Work, the others probably don't have the funds readily available like Downtown Crenshaw does. Do what is morally right and sell us the mall. Sell the mall to Downtown Crenshaw. The whole world is now aware of the severe racist tactics that is used against us. Please take us seriously. And
Thank
this
you,
is a
Ms.
demand,
Sanse.
not a plea.
Thank you, Ms. Sanse. Your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you, Ms. Sanse. Next speaker, please.
Next, we will call on Jan Williams. Ms. Williams, can you hear me? Ms. Williams, are you? Good morning, Ms. Williams.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go
hear
ahead.
you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had to turn down the other.
Okay.
Good morning, LACERA board. My name is Jan Williams. I'm board member with Downtown Crenshaw Rising. I've lived in the community my whole life, and my family's lived in the Crenshaw community since 1950. I currently live within walking distance of the Crenshaw Mall, and I'm a core team organizer of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. While there might be a lot about finance and real estate that I don't know, and we have had we have had to hire advisors to help guide us. One thing we as Black people absolutely know and understand is power. The power that LACERA has given from county taxpayers and from the working labor of mostly Black and brown people. And we're here today because LACERA gave Dusha Bank the power to decide who our Crenshaw Mall is sold to. DWS is LACERA's chosen agent for Capri Urban Investors, who owns the mall. LACERA is the most powerful member of the advisory committee of Capri Urban Investors. LACERA gave Dusha Bank the power to control the sale of the Crenshaw Mall. You admit to it in your own board report dated May 29, 2020. In April 2019, the Capri Urban Investors Advisory Committee voted unanimously to direct Capri to retain DWS on behalf of Capri Urban Investors to oversee the sale effort and continued assessment management of the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. LACERA also gives Dusha Bank and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that word right, but that's how I read it, a lot of power by paying them lots of fees and contracts. DWS is your biggest real estate manager. The Crenshaw community in Black LA is asking you to use the power that you gave over at Dusha Bank and DWS to get the mall sold to Downtown Crenshaw. And if you don't, if you let DWS sell the Crenshaw Mall to another outside gentrifier or one of the gentrifiers with Black celebrity puppets as their front, you will be using your power to kill Black LA. The gun will be shot by DWS, but it will be filled by the bullets of LACERA, the bullets LACERA loaded. So please use the power that this board has to decide to empower Black Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
And
Williams.
sell them all to Downtown Crenshaw Rising. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Linda.
Next, we will call on Mr. Damian Goodman. Mr. Goodman, please enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Will be filled by the bullets of LACERA, the bullets LACERA loaded. So please use the power that this board has and decide to empower Black Los Angeles. Thank you.
Mr. Goodman, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, so I'm on. Well, good morning, Board of Investments. Damien Goodman, board member of Downtown Crenshaw Rising, 28-year resident of Leimert Park. I live a 5-minute walk from Crenshaw Mall. I want to begin by publicly thanking Mr. Green for his powerful statement on the sale of the mall. Board members, many of you received our offer directly, and I would ask Ms. McClellan to circulate both our offer and our statement sent this morning directly to each board member. The burden has now shifted. The operative question has changed from does Downtown Crenshaw Rising have the money in the bank and the equity partners to complete the transactions to now, how on earth could Deutsche Bank DWS not award the contract to Downtown Crenshaw Rising? With our community-friendly equity partners, over $28 million in philanthropy in the bank and more wired daily, the backing of some of the biggest philanthropists in California, a vision for redevelopment crafted by the community, an all-star development team that will turn this community vision into reality, and a national groundswell supporting Black Los Angeles demand for community control of our largest, most iconic Black commercial hub. Downtown Crenshaw Rising is the obvious, safest, and most logical choice. No other buyer provides a surety to close. The real estate industry knows it, Wall Street knows it, DWS knows it, and you know it. If in less than 2 weeks, we can raise over $34 million and secure another 20 to 37 million in strong letters of interest from community-friendly capital and philanthropists without site control, can you imagine what we can raise philanthropically with a signed purchase and sale agreement? There is now no doubt that we will close, and we will do so quickly. There is now no doubt that we can outbid any outside gentrifier, even if they're coming with some Black celebrities as their puppet in front. We have the money in the bank today for this purchase and would put more into this purchase than any other developer who's at the table. From Black Lives Matter to the NAACP to SCLC to National Action Network to the Baptist Ministers Congress, we are united. From the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Homeowners Coalition to the Los Angeles Tenants Union, we are the only group that has both. From the National Black Contractors Association to the LA Black Worker Centers, we have shown that we are the only group that can and will unite this community in Black Los Angeles behind this amazing vision. And it's because we are authentically of the community. We have been on these streets for decades, and we have been organizing for this purpose for 10 months. And so what a tremendous opportunity this is for LACERA. This body has the chance to fulfill its fiduciary duties and the UN principles on responsible investment, to which LACERA is a signatory, and be on the right side of history. LACERA is being given an opportunity to be a leader in equitable and sustainable development in Black communities. The eyes of the nation are watching, and your agent, Deutsche Bank DWS, will take Downtown Crenshaw's generous offer seriously, take its obligations to treat us as the bona fide bidders that we are, and finally come to the table to negotiate in good faith if you request that of them. And so we are asking you that today, you use that power, you use that voice as displayed beautifully by
Thank you,
board member
Mr.
Green,
Goodman. Your minutes
to
is
sell
up.
them all to Downtown Crenshaw Rising. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Appreciate your comments. Next speaker, Linda.
Next, we will call on Greg Akili. Mr. Akili, if you can please enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
You can begin now.
Yes, my name is Akili, and I'm a steering committee member of the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance, director of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, a core organizer with Black Lives Matter of LA, Los Angeles, and I live within walking distance of the Crenshaw Mall on Martin Luther King. I'm here to urge you to use your power to influence Deutsche Bank and DWS to sell Downtown Crenshaw Rising. We have not answered the question of whether we have the money. We have the money. We are asking you to take our money, as a matter of fact. Most critical commercial assets like this would already have taken control. I grew up in the segregated South long after we fought and won the right to sit in at counters. But if we couldn't afford
to pay for the meal, it didn't matter. In cases we are willing to advance the interest first. So we fought to make changes, but now we have to make and get those changes accepted. There's only one word to describe what has happened with the purchase of the mall and the pension fund there, and that is anti-Blackness. No other Black famous faces fronting white gentrifications will change that. And so just as Black people forced those walls of injustice to come tumbling down during Jim Crow, we are doing the same thing here and urging you to help us tear down those walls and award the bid to downtown Crenshaw. We fought long and hard during apartheid and heard these same arguments about only being passive investors from public funds and using financial fiduciary responsibility as a cover to not do the right thing. They said they didn't have the power then too. And those arguments were no more convincing than about apartheid than they are now, as we urge you to sell the Crenshaw Mall. History is on our side, just like it was during the struggles against apartheid. So we know you have the power. We know you have the capacity. What we are asking you to do is use that power to sell and accept the bid of downtown Crenshaw. It would put you and the board on the right side of history. We have already paid with our blood for that mall, with the murder of Grishario Mack by LAPD. We have been supporters of that mall for decades. It was a centerpiece and is a centerpiece of the Pan-African Film Festival. Now let us continue to be what we have been for that mall for many years. And
Thank you. Your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you, Mr. Akili. Appreciate your comments. Next speaker, Linda.
Next, we will call on Jacqueline Taylor. Ms. Taylor, can you please enter *6 to unmute yourself?
Okay. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Taylor. Feel free to start.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning, board. My name is Jacqueline Taylor. You can hear me, right?
Yes, you're fine. Thank you.
I have spoken to this board regarding the sale of the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall on 2 other occasions. I have written to several board members individually. I have gathered support from other LACERA members and colleagues that I worked with, and I have signed petitions in support of Downtown Crenshaw Rising's right to purchase this mall. Now I'm wondering, what more can I do? What more will it take to persuade you, the board of LACERA, to give Downtown Crenshaw Rising, which, by the way, is really the only voice of the community in this particular bidding process? What more will it take to give them the economical, social, and political justice and the opportunity to purchase this mall to indeed change the power dynamic of Los Angeles? I am a 40-year LACERA member, and I'm very, very proud of that. My aunt, who just recently passed at 96 years old, was a 60-year member of LACERA. My daughter is a 15-year member of LACERA. I speak on behalf of them and others who are fully vested in LACERA. This is what we want. Allow Downtown Crenshaw Rising to purchase this mall. They represent this community. Their bid is unparalleled. I am also an alum of the UC system, and my granddaughter is an alum of the UC system. To the Regents, this is what we want. Allow Downtown Crenshaw to purchase this mall. They represent this community. Their bid is inclusive. It is pivotal. It is a game changer in shaping this community. I am a homeowner in this community. I was born, bred, and raised here. I want my grandchildren and indeed my great-grandchildren to be able to live, work, and play right here in this historic African American community. Board, it is within your power to change the course of how we do business in regards to urban development. Black folks, people of color, and other progressive conscious Americans, we want to change. We're tired of elite landowners and corporations making decisions for our community, gentrifying our community, speaking on behalf of our community, stealing the resources and profits from our community. Now is the time for change, and you have the power to show true leadership in this moment.
Thank you, Ms.
support for
Taylor.
community.
Your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor, for your comments and for your family's service to the county. Next speaker, please.
Next, we will call on Eleni Johnson. Ms. Johnson, please enter *6 to unmute yourself. Ms. Johnson, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead, please.
Hi, yes. I speak today asking that you demand that the sale of the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza be sold to Downtown Crenshaw Rising. All bids from developers have at this time been submitted, and Downtown Crenshaw Rising is the only bid that seeks to build community wealth through a cooperative ecosystem, starting with this 40 acres and a mall. Excuse me. We've gathered more than 13,000 signatures. We are a coalition of over 300 community-based groups, neighborhood associations, civil rights organizations, elected officials, merchants, property owners, business leaders, and artists. We've submitted a thoughtful and thorough bid with world-renowned partners, incredible capital sources, and we look forward to your decision to sell the mall back to the community that it rightfully belongs to. Since its establishment in May of 2020, Downtown Crenshaw Rising has been the only group that has conducted an inclusive process of open meetings and expressed an intent of uniting the entire community. Our community is made up of union members, many of whom, as you've already heard from, belong to this pension fund. We hold that the pensions of public employees should be used to protect and lift up the communities where those workers live, not displace them. And as a labor organizer, I strongly urge you to work on behalf and invest on behalf of the working class people of the Crenshaw community. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for your comments. Next speaker, Linda.
Next, we will call on Harold Huggins. Mr. Huggins, please enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Many of whom, as you've already heard from, belong to this pension fund. We hold that the pensions of public employees.
Mr. Huggins, we can hear you. If you would like to start, feel free.
Where those workers live, not displaced.
Mr. Huggins, please enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Good morning. My name is Harold Huggins. I am the director of the Council for Education. The Council for Education unequivocally supports Downtown Crenshaw's purchase of the mall. And more importantly, we believe that community ownership will reverse gentrification. If the board decides to sell to a private party, that would mean that the private party would not be bound under Title IV of the Higher Education Act and under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In other words, a private party would not be responsive to the community's needs and look into their own financial return on investors. LACERA has a community obligation because of the fact that you are a government entity providing a public good. And it is in the opinion of the Council for Education that to sell the mall to a private party other than Downtown Crenshaw Rising, in our legal opinion, would violate the Higher Education Act and Title IV of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. What I'm alluding to is this, is that Proposition 209 is the cause of gentrification. The Council for Education is working with the Biden administration to give us legal standing to sue the state of California to ensure whether or not if there is compliance with provisions of the Higher Education Act and Title IV of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I do have a website that I will publish with documents to support our legal theory. It is at lacera.cfored.com. Once again, that website address that will be published shortly is lacera.cfored.com. I would like to have the document entered into the records. Thank you very much, Board, for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huggins. And for those waiting on hold, you'll notice there's a slight delay between what you're hearing through our stream and then when we ask you to begin your public comments. So just be prepared for that. Next speaker, Linda.
Thank you. Next, we will call on Donald Byers. Mr. Byers, please enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Donald Byers. Good morning to the board. I am a long-term Crenshaw renter. I've been here pretty much since birth, since the 1980s, and I've seen the community change over time. Something that I'm really concerned about is the downtown Crenshaw Mall being sold to outside organizations or organizations that don't have really any tie to the community. Now, as a renter, there are about 20,000 of us that are at risk for displacement. Now, keep in mind, that's about 62% of the local community. So this mall, we would like to keep in the hands of our local community so that we can develop it with us in mind, with us thriving, with us not being placed out or pushed out of our own community. So thank you for your time, and please consider selling the mall to Downtown Crenshaw Rising. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Byers. Next speaker, Linda.
Next, we will call on Oliver Cherry. Oliver, please enter *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, he's not available. Next, we will call on Jesse Estes. Jess Estes.
In mind, with us thriving, with us not being placed out or pushed out of our own community.
Yes.
Yes. Good morning. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Oh, great. Do I need to hit *6?
No, you're good. We can hear you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Jess Estes. I'm an activist in LA County, and I work with coalitions representing hundreds of grassroots orgs involved in budget advocacy for racial and gender justice. The demand today is that the downtown Crenshaw bid be the only one that's considered for the redevelopment of Crenshaw Mall, and this is why. Working in a field where the goal is to create systems of support and care for impacted populations, one of the things that stood out to me immediately about the downtown Crenshaw development plan is how many aspects of it parallel and preemptively address these pain points that we're currently taking money back from the county to fix already, like with Measure J. So in that work, we're addressing these gaping deficiencies that exist widely across our LA communities that cause needless displacement, harm, and punitive action, whereas people could just be, like adequately supported instead. So The DC plan addresses housing equity, economic opportunity, job training, local labor contracts, small business support, and environmental rehab through sustainable design that provides clean, renewable energy, not just for the property, but for the surrounding neighborhoods. Like, are you kidding me? This is ideal. This is incredible. Who wouldn't want to live in that world? Support for elders, children, community health services, and legal services. All these bullet points converge into a holistic system of community care and support that thousands of community members already stand behind. It's a project Angelenos deserve, and it's what the Crenshaw community has worked for and deserves. So through the lens of budget advocacy, we recognize that this type of supportive and cooperative community structure inherently saves the state and county's money and creates healthier places for healthier humans with a chance of self-determination for success and well-being. So I kind of feel like it should be explicitly stated that when all the previous objections for why DC has been denied this opportunity in the past have sort of been just ground into dust, which they have, what we're left with is either awarding the bid to Downtown Crenshaw exclusively or admitting that the reason for not doing so is because you don't trust the community to know its own needs and you don't trust them to execute this project. And I really hope that's not the case because I feel like that would be deeply racist. So thousands and thousands of eyes are on this project right now. We have so much community support and nationwide support. I hope today you make the right decision and choose the rational choice, which is to award Downtown Crenshaw the bid for Crenshaw Mall. Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate your comments very much. Next speaker, Linda.
Next, we will call on Diane Waldo. Ms. Waldo, please enter *6 to unmute yourself. Ms. Waldo, you may
Yes.
begin now.
Good morning. My name is Diane Waldo, and I would like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I've worked at HCA for over 45 years now as an X-ray tech. And I'm sure you know that HCA is one of the largest publicly traded hospital corporations in the United States. And it operates in hospitals in many states, including California. We just have a few issues that are currently at my facility that I would like to make you aware of, so that if you have any concerns, you would be able to call and contact someone at HCA to ask them about their workforce management approach. And since my time is limited, I'll just cut to the chase. The main issue here is we have many long-term employees that are making less than $15 an hour. Some I work with on a daily basis. She's been there probably 20 years now, and she doesn't even make $13 an hour. And she has to work 2 jobs in order to make ends meet. And another big issue that I'm seeing lately is we have a lot of our other long-term employees that are leaving. And it's due to various conditions there that they're working under. And just inpatient care is being affected by these continuous employee turnovers. There's PPE issues with some departments. It's just things that need to be addressed, and we just really would like to make you aware of these issues so that maybe you could give somebody at HCA, a call and suggest that they change their approach and how they're treating their employees. We would like to feel that we are a valuable member of this HCA team. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. Hopefully things will be corrected soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Waldo. Next speaker, Linda.
Next, we will call on Carrie Cavazos.
Hello, my name is Carrie Cavazos. I'm a registered nurse at Riverside Community Hospital.
Did we lose you? We can hear you. Ms. Cavazos?
Yeah, I think we lost her. We can call on the next person in the queue.
Okay.
Okay. We will call on Michael Ring. Michael, please enter *6 to unmute yourself. Mr. Ring, can you hear us?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Ring. We can hear you now.
Oh, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Ring, and I work with Service Employees International Union's Capital Stewardship Program. As you know, tens of thousands of SEIU members count on LACERA to ensure they enjoy a secure retirement. I want to thank the members of the LACERA Board of Investments for the opportunity to speak with you today, and most importantly, for your work as fiduciaries to ensure that all Los Angeles County employees receive their retirement benefits. As you have heard from a couple of my speakers who spoke previously, there are issues at HCA that are important in terms of how HCA is managing its workforce that we believe should be of concern to all HCA investors. We believe concerns about these business practices are relevant to LACERA because of your portfolio's exposure to HCA, which you have through the holdings of some of your largest public equity managers. We also believe that it impacts LACERA and other similar long-term investors more broadly, given that as one of the largest healthcare corporations in the United States, HCA sets a market standard in an industry critical to the overall functioning of our economy. An industry that impacts taxpayers, consumers, workers, and investors, including pension funds and their plan participants. We will share with your team a series of publicly available reports and articles that document the potential risk of HCA's business practices to long-term investors like LACERA. Some of the issues of possible concern to consider for further due diligence include HCA policies regarding billing, stock buybacks, taxation, public subsidies, lobbying, compensation, and of course, the workforce issues shared earlier that have only become more acute during the COVID-19 pandemic. We encourage you to do your own due diligence with this information to assess the risk HCA's practices may represent to the interests of LACERA plan participants who, of course, depend on the long-term healthy performance of the fund's investments. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. And again, thank you for your work facilitating retirement security for the employees of Los Angeles County.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Ring. Next speaker, Linda.
We will call on Carrie Cavazos again. Carrie, can you hear?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Cavazos. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, my name is Carrie Cavazos. I am a registered nurse in California at Riverside Community Hospital, which is an HCA Corporation hospital. We are currently 327 nurses short-staffed at the facility. The corporation continues to hire nurses, train the nurses at a cost that is non-productive. Until that nurse is trained fully, can tame patients on her own, she becomes a productive member of the facility. The conditions of the facility are subpar. Lack of proper equipment and staffing, the nurse then gets her training and moves to another facility. It is the fiduciary responsibility of this corporation to maintain the staff. You and I, as investors, stockholders, need to have this cycle changed so our money can be done and invested properly. Currently, the state law of SB 227 states mandatory California at a ratio of fine to the facility. The first offense is staggering $25,000 to put a nurse out of ratio. The second offense is $50,000. Again, it is a fiduciary responsibility for you and me as stockholders that this hospital maintains our ratios, maintains the nurses, maintains the equipment that we need to keep you safe as a member, our family members safe, our community safe. I urge each and every one of us to make our facilities mandate our fiduciary responsibility and keep our money protected. I want to take the time to thank you for listening to me today, and I hope that you and your family stay safe. Thank you very much.
Appreciate those comments, Ms. Cavazos. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next, we're going to be calling on Jackie Ryan. Okay, I'm sorry. Next, we're going to call on Kim Jurgen.
Kim Jurgen, our next speaker.
Please enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Good morning, LACERA board, and thank you for having me, giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Kim Jurgen, and I've been a resident of the Crenshaw district for nearly 40 years. In this current climate we're in, after the George Floyd killing, many white folks are talking, now is the time to repair the 400 years of oppression inflicted upon Black folks since they were stolen out of Africa. This is the time of reckoning, because racism is a conscious construct of many white folks in America. When Downtown Crenshaw put in its bid to purchase the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall on behalf of the Black community, with all objections met head on and overcome, with a most viable bid, and no decision was made to award the purchase agreement. In my opinion, this is racism. When Downtown Crenshaw is called twice to present their bid and asked for a second showing each time, just to be told no flat out, or no decision can be made now, really implies to me, even though Downtown Crenshaw's bid is very viable, that they are saying Black folks do not have the wherewithal or the capability of carrying out a real estate development project of the magnitude of the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. And when Downtown Crenshaw Black presenters are told, I'm paraphrasing, that this is a club in which you are not a member, referring to the white commercial real estate establishment, this, in my opinion, is racism, plain and simple. If the decision is made not to award the purchase agreement of the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza to Downtown Crenshaw, it is conscious bias. In other words, systemic racism on the part of DWS. LACERA's advisory council must not allow racism and or greed to cloud your advisory position on the award of the purchase agreement of the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. Downtown Crenshaw, on behalf of the Black community, has presented an exceptional bid with full capacity to perform as offered. For this reason, it is warranted that you should advise DWS to a positive decision and award the purchase of the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza to Downtown Crenshaw Rising. For we shall not be moved. And Downtown Crenshaw.
Thank you, Ms. Jurgen. Your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Jurgen. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker will be Jackie Ryan.
Yes.
Good morning. We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, LACERA Board.
Good
My
morning.
name is Jackie Ryan, and I'm co-vice president of the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance. As a resident in the Crenshaw community for over 50 years, I assert that the community has a right to determine what happens to it in the space it occupies. The residents of the Crenshaw community are proud of where they live and are dedicated to maintaining its vibrancy. We are committed to supporting businesses and continuing to strengthen our community. I do not believe that those who have worked a lifetime for their pensions would want their pension funds to wipe out and displace the Black community. Nor do I think they would want to erase the future space for Black people in the Crenshaw area. I ask that LACERA support the downtown Crenshaw Rising bid to purchase the Baldwin Hills Plaza. The time frames for the bid submission have been extremely unreasonable. Yet downtown Crenshaw has more than sufficient capital contract. That's the end of my statement. Please award the contract to Downtown Crenshaw Rising. Jackie Ryan speaking. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comments, Ms. Ryan. Next speaker, please.
Next, we will call on Alice Goff. Ms. Goff, please enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am, I just did. Are you hearing me?
Yes, good morning. We can hear you. Please feel free to start.
Oh, good morning. How is everyone?
We're doing
My name
well,
is
thank
Alice.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
good. Good. My name is Alice Goff. I retired from the city of Los Angeles. Combined service years of 43 years of service with the city and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Yeah, I've been out of the workplace too long. And AFSCME. Excuse me. I served as the president of AFSCME Local 3090 and District Council 36. However, I'm speaking today as a member of the community in support of the bid submitted by Downtown Crenshaw Rising, a community project to purchase the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. As a member of the community, I've supported many of the businesses in the mall over the years, and I've also seen many come and go. The Downtown Crenshaw Rising project sought out community input along with design professionals to determine the best use of the property for our community. Our leaders have done really an amazing job of putting together the funding package and expertise needed to make this a successful project by and for the people. We don't believe any other prospective buyer would engage in this way. Also, a significant number of residents in the community are retired or active members of the pension system with, a genuine interest of ensuring that the system is sustainable. This is an unprecedented project in the city of Los Angeles. We believe we come with an outstanding bid proposal and believe that we should be awarded the bid. It not only makes good business sense, but it is right for a time such as this. We really urge your strong support and consideration. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your comments, Ms. Goff. Next speaker, please.
Next, we will call on Amber Height. Amber, please go ahead and enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Good morning,
And-
Ms. Height. We can hear you if you would like to start.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Amber Height, and I am a student in the downtown Crenshaw area. And I would just like to say that I would like to see LACERA use its influence to persuade all the relevant parties to sell the Crenshaw Mall to downtown Crenshaw. You've heard so many statements coming from so many angles regarding how this sale would impact the Black community. And I would just like to add to that by saying that the hindrance that's coming from certain parties is very unnecessary, and it's extremely distracting to Black progress. Black people have been the economic engine for this country for so many years. And it's time that we are repaid for all the pain and suffering and trauma that we have endured trying to make this country great. That was not our original business. However, today's business is that we receive this mall to protect our community and all those who will come after us. Thank you so much.
Appreciate your comments this morning, Ms. Height. Next speaker, please.
Next, we will call on Pastor William Smart. Mr. Smart, please enter *6 to unmute yourself. Mr. Smart, you may begin now.
Hello.
Good morning, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. This is Pastor William Smart. I am president and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California. And I used to be a resident of Leimert Park, where my ministry still remains. On behalf of the Black Civil Rights Organizations of Los Angeles, including SCLC, the NAACP Los Angeles branch, the National Action Network of Los Angeles, the Baptist Ministers Conference of Greater Los Angeles and Southern California, the Congress of Racial Equality, and the Black Community Clergy Racial Labor Alliance. We are all proud endorsers of the downtown Crenshaw. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the incredible team of people who have make up that board and who have been on the streets fighting for racial justice for decades. We really see the nexus between racial justice and economic empowerment in this development. We see that they have impressed us by the nationally renowned technical advisors and real estate professionals who make up the downtown Crenshaw development team, who will take our Black community's vision and build a dynamic institution at that intersection of Crenshaw and Martin Luther King Jr. And that is a sacred space for SCLC because it has Dr. Martin Luther King's name on it. LA's Black Civil Rights Organizations want this Black mall to be a place in the Black community that hands and helps collectively control and operate by us, for us, and the community. It is important that our children see that we as a people can build something important and build their future. The amount of fundraising that the leaders of downtown Crenshaw have secured is historic. It has never before happened. It is a sign of the times where people are rooting for Black people to finally be given a chance, finally to be given an opportunity to realize our dream and self-determination. So now that we have the money, we ask that you give us the opportunity to achieve this economic liberation on behalf of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others who have been fighting. Give us the opportunity today. Take our money so that we can take control of this space. And thank you to our brother David Green for your powerful statement. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Pastor Smart. Next speaker, Linda.
Next, we will call on Zarita Jones. Ms. Jones, please enter *6 to unmute yourself. Ms. Jones, please enter *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello, this is Arita Jones speaking.
Good morning. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I actually live in the community that surrounds the mall, and I'm a mother of 5 and a grandmother of 6, and I live within 1 mile of the mall. Not only that, do I have 4 generations of my family that also live within 1 mile of the mall. I'm a retired grocery worker from Albertsons that was actually on the mall property. And I know personally thousands of residents within the community within those 24 years. Not only did I graduate from the high school that's within 1 mile of the mall, I'm also the co-founder of 2 organizations and the vice chairperson of another organization that's all based within the community that's focused on anti-displacement. And just so you know, there's over 20,000 renters that live within 1 mile of this mall, and 62% of the community are renters. We are all patrons of the mall and all the businesses around the mall, and we are definitely at risk of being displaced. Not only our housing is at risk, but also our businesses are also at risk. I want to urge you to please, if possible, make sure you consider all of the individuals that not only patronize the mall, but live within the community that will be devastated and that will be displaced if anything happens. That's why we're so passionate. That's why we were able to take and rally thousands of people around this project, because we're here, we're rooted. You have legacies and different you have different community members that range from different ages, from the retired to the very young, that all live within this community. This is our entertainment center. This is our shopping center. We want to maintain our mall in our community. We want to own it. We have the money for it. We have rallied support throughout the United States in order to assist us in our project, in our vision. And I wanted to say thank you very, very much for listening.
Appreciate your comments, Ms. Jones. And Linda, I believe we have our last speaker to be called.
Yes. Lastly, we will be calling on Vernon Mincy.
Range from different ages, from the retired to the very young, that all live within this community.
Vernon, you may begin.
Our shopping center, we want to maintain our mall, our community.
Vernon, can you hear us?
We have the money for it.
Yes, I can.
Okay, we can hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
Please feel free. Yep, you can go ahead and start.
Hi.
Thank you.
Good morning to the board. My name is Bernine Mincy, and I represent a number of organizations, the NAACP, Black Lives Matter LA, Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, and Downtown Crenshaw, and I'm a business owner, and I do a business with a number of folks in the Crenshaw area. It is vital and it is necessary that the bid that Downtown Crenshaw has submitted to buy the mall be accepted. You know, at this point in time in our history, it would be a sad shame that a Black development company that has put together an excellent bid in order to purchase the mall, and a team of folks that are ready to execute would be denied an opportunity for somebody outside of the community to come in and buy up and also displace people in the community. It is vital, and I'm asking you as a board to utilize your power and your influence to execute and have the Downtown Crenshaw be the winners of the bid to purchase and buy the mall. It is vital that the community, again, is not displaced. It is vital that the bid that has been submitted is one that is of care for the community and for self-determination. We're not asking for no charity. We're asking to take control of the mall and to buy it for the people that resonate in that particular community so that we have a viable option for those that live in the community and participate in the future and the development of the Crenshaw area. So I ask for each of you as board members to utilize your power and your influence to inform DWS to sell the property to downtown Crenshaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments this morning, and thank you to everyone that participated in public comment and those that submitted written comments as well. That closes out item number 4, public comment. Moving on to item 5, CEO report. Mr. Kryman.
Yes, good morning, Chair Knox and trustees. In consideration of the full agenda, I will be brief with my supplemental comments on the CEO report that is included as part of the meeting materials. March Madness continues to be a very busy time as we work diligently to process retirement applications from our members. We are on track to process slightly more than 1,740 applications that were processed last year. We continue to redistribute resources and staff to meet the workload demands on our benefits division that are tasked with verifying our final average compensation, service time, and pension allowance for our newly retired members. We are about 75% of the way through processing the March retirement applications, so we are on track to process all retirement applications that have been filed. Our retiree healthcare staff continue to deal with heavy call center volumes. We are answering nearly 1,000 calls per week with questions related to health plan enrollment, Part B application status, and other general healthcare questions. We continue to refine our return to work plans for staff to return to normal on-site activities, including welcoming back our LACERA members for person-to-person counseling and holding board meetings on premise and in person. Accordingly, we are evaluating the best possible configuration of the boardroom to ensure we meet the social distancing guidelines established by the Department of Public Health to protect the health of the trustees, staff, and members of the public upon their return. There was a trustee question regarding last week regarding the mail distribution counts for our Spotlight newsletter to our retirees and postscript newsletters to our active members. The March 2021 newsletters were mailed to about 67,000 retirees and 108,000 active members for a total of 175,000 mailings via the U.S. Postal Service. With regards to our email notifications sent to our members as part of the monthly CEO email message, our distribution list reaches about 102,000 of our active and retired members. While we do not have 100% sign up from our members, we continue to encourage them to sign up for email notifications and for mylacera.com to provide alternative service delivery options that will better serve the needs of our members. Finally, we will begin interviewing candidates next week for the Deputy Chief Executive Officer position with the expectation of being completed with the interview process by the end of March. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
We have a question from Ms. Sanchez.
Actually, I have 2 quick questions. The first is, do we know how many of our eligible employees have been able to be vaccinated? Do we know sort of what our vaccination population is at LACERA? And the second is, have you established a firm date on the return to work timeline, both for employees and for in-person board meetings?
We have not asked our staff to report their vaccination status, so we don't have that information readily available. We're still working on with our legal staff and our HR folks to determine the best way. We're asking them to voluntarily report, but we don't have a formal policy on that regard. With regard to a firm date, it really depends on the vaccination rollout. It depends on how well the vaccine takes hold. We're thinking that we should be, we're at least planning for a September, early September opening. That being said, I know that there is a desire from some board members to have the ability to be on site during the board hearings. And so we're looking at some sort of a plan or a cycle where we can have a limited number of trustees come into the office beginning, I believe, in March, We do have some space limitations. Our board hearing room is very, very small. And so we're looking at possibly having a hybrid board meeting where some trustees will be on site and others will continue to participate remotely. And so I'm actually in the office today and we'll be walking the space to try to figure out best alternatives for the public meetings to happen.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. Santos, I noted in your report, you talked about email blasts to members. And I am concerned about the fact that communications are going via email only to those who have emails. And so I don't know I think this is probably an OOC issue for Board of Retirement, but if they're not addressing it, and I'll attend the meetings where they may be addressing it, but I'm concerned that particularly with Mr. Grable's well-drafted commentary this recent week or last week, that went only to members with email addresses on file, which I think is only about 50 to 60% of all members. So I am concerned that we are limiting the distribution channels to members. And I don't recall members getting an email or a letter saying, heads up, we're moving to an all email or an all electronic distribution method sometime soon, encouraging them to get their email addresses on file. So I'm just concerned about that. If OOC is addressing it, fine, but if not, then if you could maybe just provide some commentary to the board next month, that would be fine with me.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Kryman? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 6, the Chief Investment Officer's report. Mr. Grable.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, trustees. Thank you, Robert, for pulling up the CIO report. Also, in the interest of time, I will try to move through this quickly. If we can go to slide number 6, please. So on slide 6, and I'll talk a bit about some new additions. The chart on the upper right, we added to it the labor force participation rate. Previously, we just had the unemployment rate on that, and that rate tells us some things. The employment rate tells us maybe more, and it's noticeably down since the onset of the pandemic. We're still down over 9 million jobs from before the pandemic. If we can turn to slide number 7, please. On slide number 7, we see interest rates are on both sides of the slide, both on the column for recent themes and what we're watching. And as we can see, if we go back to slide 5 very briefly, that interest rates are still near historic lows, yet the yield curve has steepened, and there's been a rapid move in interest rates from near zero. And so what does this mean? And we've discussed in past meetings about cost of capital, about the difficulty with price discovery of assets with near zero interest rates. So if we go from zero to something, even if it's very low, that may have a noticeable impact on capital markets in a couple ways. One, especially for long duration assets, we've noticed how the NASDAQ has been challenged over the last couple of weeks as technology companies are long duration assets with cash flows in the out years. It also may have an impact on strategies that depend on leverage. This is something that we should contemplate. Today, we have a couple discussions about strategic asset allocation, be it our capital market assumptions, as well as our asset liability modeling process. If we can turn to slide 9, please. Slide 9 shows our net returns through January. The pension was up 10 basis points in January with a market value of $65.5 billion. We're within target on all asset categories. However, we're most overweight public equity. And as we rebalance, public equity will be the likely source of capital. Next slide, please. OPEB was flat for the month of January. If you can see on the chart on the bottom that the OPEB plans have a heady a near 17% fiscal year to date return. And that's a result of the different allocation from the pension and the larger allocation to public equities. The balance of OPEB is at $1.9 billion. Next slide, please. I'll just go to my notes. So slide number 11 is one of two new slides on risk that we've added to the CIO report. We continue to implement our MSCI total fund risk system. Last month we had an education session. This month we're including in the CIO report. It will be refined over time. What this slide shows in the upper left are our functional asset categories and the impact on total fund expected volatility. On the right side, we can see that growth is over 50% of our assets. And as we model equities to be risky, and that's something that we'll see in our asset allocation study, that it makes sense that 77% of total expected volatility is from equities. The charts show also on the right the standalone risks of asset categories without the benefits of inter-asset category diversification. And the big surprise there is in real assets, specifically core and value-added real estate, that while those are 7% of assets, they're over 10% of total fund risk. And specifically, it's riskier than the benchmark risk. And we can also see that core and value-add real estate as implemented is riskier than opportunistic real estate, which should be riskier. So if we can go to the next slide, please. What this slide shows is active risk, and active risk measures how we differ from our policy portfolio being our strategic asset allocation. It shows our allocation over and under weights, as well as manager security decisions and how that impacts our active risk. Total forecasted active risk is 131 basis points. What we can see on the upper left is that the cash overlay has a negative contribution. That's good, and it's by design. The overlay is used to rebalance the fund towards our policy. The chart on the right shows our active weights, where they compared to our targets. Growth, for example, is 51% compared to 40% target. In growth, our active risk is 42 basis points. 25 basis points comes from allocation overweights, and 17% comes from manager decisions. And what we can see from the chart on the right is that the majority of the fund active risk is core and value added real estate. It's 70 basis points of our total 131 basis points comes from a 7% allocation. And that's something that we need to continue to address in our structure reviews. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Okay, I have Ms. Sanchez in the queue.
First, I just want to highlight these two additional slides are so helpful, particularly in sort of understanding that contribution to risk concept and where those balances are tilted. So I just want to thank your staff and I think this was probably just one of the most powerful additions to this deck.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, thank you very much, Mr. Grable. As we move to the next part of the agenda, I just want to mention that we'll probably take a couple of short breaks today, given the number of items. I don't want the presenters to feel like they're being squeezed. Public comment is an important part of the meeting, but we still have some other important business, so I'll try and manage a couple of breaks in there just so we get a minute to stretch or take care of other business. With that, we'll start with number 7, consent agenda. Recommendation is submitted by Mr. Bernstein, Chair of the Corporate Governance Committee, that the board approve a revised corporate governance and stewardship principles policy. And then as noted, Mr. Drazel's memo, that the board's options include 3 different things there. So is there a motion on any of those?
I'll make a motion.
For which piece, Ms. Sanchez? Is it the base, or there was 3 different things?
I believe it's the, does the base include the addition that we made to human capital management?
No, I believe the base was accept and approve the recommended revision as unanimously approved in advance for the board's consideration. The second option was provide feedback for the incorporation of military status as an additional unique attribute. And then the third one was provide feedback for the principal's language addressing equal opportunity and non-discrimination. And it incorporated a detailed list of diversity attributes that would be included under the human capital management.
Can we move all three because those are mutually exclusive?
I would.
Which is
I
the
do not
most
see why we couldn't
inclusive?
move all three. Go ahead,
Which is
Ms.
the most
Sanchez.
inclusive version? Is there one that catches all of those, or do
I think
one
if you
exclude
move
the
to
others?
approve all three of those, that would incorporate everything. Mr.
Chair
Burns?
Knox, Chair Knox, Mr. Drazel may confirm. My impression is this was set to go on consent. I think it's set to go.
That's what I thought.
Scott, if you have a different impression, please speak up. But because I didn't, staff prepared the memo, but my impression was this was intended to pass on consent if it was without objection to the trustees.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair and Chair Bernstein, trustees. The committee last month did, as part of its regular review of the corporate governance and stewardship principles review, the principles in advance of this year's proxy season, and unanimously approved modifications that were recommended at the time for consideration to the full board. In that approval, we heard comments and questions from committee members on how do the principles address veteran status and other aspects of equal employment opportunity that in endeavoring to be responsive to those questions, we've filled out more information in the cover memo for the board's consideration today. So what is being presented for approval is what was unanimously approved and reviewed by the committee at the time. I believe that there was a concern about not creating policy extemporaneously by the committee, but we added for consideration further information on equal opportunity for veteran status and military service, both throughout a company's workforce, as well as service on the board. So on page 5 of the memo, or page, let's see, it would be page 50 of the combined stack, there is language that, should the board wish, could be further incorporated to more explicitly reference various attributes of what we mean by equal opportunity in the human capital segment. Federal, state, local law provisions cover a very wide range of attributes, including medical condition, DNA, pregnancy status, so forth. Our language in that section is intended to be very broad, inclusive, and applicable across different markets. Should the board wish, we could add that additional detail to what was recommended by the committee and reviewed last month. We also addressed the question of whether military service or veteran status should be explicitly referenced as an aspect of board composition and quality. And on that note, our principles on board composition call for boards to have a robust mix of skills, experience, professional backgrounds that are suitable for overseeing the business strategy, risk to that strategy. Certainly military service can bring valuable experience to a number of our portfolio companies. And we do see former generals often serve on companies with international exposures or defense contracting, so forth. So that's certainly part in the spirit of the principles. We highlighted for the board's consideration that in having principles that are universal, we note that in some markets, a military affiliation might be perceived by the market as possibly a risk of political influence or undermining board independence. And last month, we had a real world experience of that when the Brazilian president appointed as a CEO a military general to Petrobras, and the market, financial markets kind of turned volatile on that stock for fear of possible influence. So that I just offer that as a note of caution in international markets.
Okay.
So the
so I'm-
recommendation
yeah.
is what was approved by the committee with some additional information should, in response to the questions that were raised in doing so.
Okay, thank you for the information. My understanding is that what we approved as a committee was sufficiently broad and certainly inclusive of this, and the sort of extensive detail may actually serve to create other problems. And so I would rather have broader language and go with what we approved. And so I'm going to move that.
I will second it.
I have, thank you for the motion. So that's to approve the original red line version without the incorporation of the additional language. And then I have Mr. Santos in the queue.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree with, and I'm in support of Ms. Sanchez's motion. I really have a problem that after a matter has been discussed at a committee, debated, and it was unanimously approved, that somehow additional information was included in this document without a full discussion at the committee level. I mean, that's the purpose of the committee, to flush out all the different issues. When stuff begins to get added after the committee has discussed that and approved, I really have a problem with that, because I think that the natural policy is that any comments that you have, the committee meetings are open to everyone. And if you have an issue, you got to take it to the committee that is discussing the particular matter. So while I don't really have much issue with some of the amendments, in principle, I support Ms. Sanchez's motion, because we cannot do that. We need to keep it consistent. And if this additional information, if anyone wants to insist on this information be added, let's take it back to the committee. We can approve what we approved at the committee level the last time, and then we can revisit this issue. And if the committee feels it's appropriate to amend, then we will do so. But again, we got to stick to our rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Any other discussion? I would point out, I would agree. I reached out to Mr. Grable because I was initially confused on the fact that it was a consent item, but it included options after the fact. So yeah, I think we can certainly tidy up that in the future, just so it's presented either as a done item on consent or something that's open to discussion and further debate. Any other comments? So we have a motion and we have a second. Linda, please call the roll.
Sure. Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Santos?
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood? Ms. Greenwood? Mr. Oakham?
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez?
Aye.
Chair Knox?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of big items coming up. Why don't we take a 5-minute break right now? It's 10:30. We'll see everybody back at 10:35. Thank you, Linda. Okay, we're on to number 8, non-consent items. Recommendation is submitted by Mr. Grable, CIO, and Jude Perez, Principal Investment Officer, that the board approve Makita Investment Group's proposed 10-year capital market expectations. And then that's number 1. Number 2, approve Makita's 20-year expectations for use in testing the reasonableness of LACERA's actuarial long-term return assumptions. We have a memo dated February 25th. Mr. Perez?
Yeah, good morning, Chair Knox. You stole half of my intro comments, so I'll speed this up a little bit. As we have discussed these last few months, the capital market expectations are fundamental inputs in a strategic asset allocation study, and they are one of the most important steps in this process. So our goal, should the board approve this recommendation today, we would bring in alternative allocations for the board to discuss in April. And really, that's all I have for an intro. So with that background, I'd like to hand it over to Tim Filla and Leandro Festino from the Makita Investment Group to walk through the expectations as well as the presentation.
Thank you, Jude, and good morning, members of the board and Mr. Chair. LACERA's investment belief states that the strategic allocation is the primary determinant of the risk and return outcomes of the portfolios, and I'm talking about the pension and the OPEB. This applies to both. This is one additional meeting in a 6+ month period when we are reviewing the most impactful decision that you as a trustee can control with respect to the fund. This is a necessary step consistent with what you have done back the last time you conducted an asset allocation study. The step is to approve the capital market expectations to be used in the models. You will recall this topic was discussed in prior meetings. Specifically, we went over the process that we followed and the latest set of iterations that Makita can produce. So these are the newest assumptions that came from our research team back in January of this year. So they've been calculated and computed by Makita. Your staff has reviewed those thoroughly. Each of the specialist consultants reviewed those thoroughly, and they've been also compared to peers and other stories and other industry practitioners. So what's in front of you has been thoroughly vetted by multiple different parties. I'd like to spend a few moments also highlighting what's different in 2021 versus 2018. And for that, the second slide in our presentation, if we can advance there. One more, please. There, thank you. So much as you have consolidated equities into public and private and move away from the small cap, large cap, domestic, international, emerging markets categorization, we believe, together with the staff, that it makes sense to also do something similar in the fixed income space in the liquid credit. So there's a lot of correlation between high yield, bank loans, and other credit categories. So maybe considering those as one category makes sense in our view. And then the second one would be illiquid credit, which is akin to the private assets in the growth category, private equity, venture capital, and the like. We're also exploring adding a fifth functional category, which would hold all the overlays and hedges, for example, currency hedge, and maybe other hedging strategies that may come in the future. We have modeled some new categories that were not present back in 2018, for example, opportunistic green strategies. And we are considering realignment of a few asset classes or sub-asset classes to the functional category that may be more representative going forward. Two examples include potentially moving value add real estate to growth. Value add may derive a growing portion of the return stream from appreciation as opposed to income, and so perhaps it makes sense to move it into growth. And TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, some groups put it into the risk reduction and mitigation. Others look at it as real assets because it has an inflation hedging into it. So again, that one is under consideration as we speak. Lastly, and consistent with conversation in past meetings, we intend to provide more insights into the impact of climate change into portfolios and into models. So we'll look at a scenario analysis, and in the second presentation today, Steve and Alina will go in greater depth into this topic. So the rest of this presentation looks at the current environment and then continues into the process that was used to achieve and arrive at the capital market expectations, and ultimately on pages 25 through 27 of our report looks at the output, which is what will be used in the models. We've been allotted 20 minutes, but that's a preview. If you want us to go in depth, we can certainly go, close to page by page and take that time. The materials are fairly easy to read. And also we can have a dialogue and answer lots of questions if you have them during this time. So I will pause and seek guidance from you as to how you want to proceed.
Sure, happy to take any questions. Does anybody want Mr. Festino to go through the rest of the packet, or?
Just a quick question, Mr. Knox, if I may. Mr. Festino, would you discuss the inflation and I mean, there's a lot of speculation that if inflation is going to increase substantially, depends on who you're listening to. What's your view in terms of inflation and how are we approaching that if that comes to fruition?
Yeah, so one of the outputs of the capital market expectation is the actual inflation to be expected and to be used in the models over the next 10 to 20 years. As with all of the other inputs, these are forecasts. This will be a central point, and we have ranges in which it could move. We understand the implications of setting these assumptions. And even if we look at today, so for example, if we were to go to page 13 of this presentation for one moment to make a point, these are a point in time estimate. So no, I'm looking at the wrong one. Maybe for the one that looks at yield, sorry, yeah, sorry, it was slide 4, my bad. In just the past month, the level of interest rates increased dramatically, at least for the short amount of time, with 30-year treasuries jumping from sub 1.5% to about 2.25%, 2.3%. Same thing with the 10-year yield. And so a lot of that is essentially nominal inflation expected now by the market that has moved the yield curve. So this is very volatile, and I think trying to arrive at a number like whether inflation is going to be 2.2 or 2.3, there is some false precision built into it. So we certainly account for it, but I wouldn't get hung up on the specific of the number. I don't know if I answer your question. If not, maybe Tim or Steve can chime in. Maybe I misunderstood it.
If inflation, as an example, if inflation increases substantially beyond what you predict, would your firm and in conjunction with the CIO and the staff come back to us and review that before the 3 years are out?
Yes. So the plan is always to formally conduct an asset allocation study period investment policy every 3 to 5 years. That said, if there are material events in the capital markets or in the economy that warrant more frequent revisions, we would collectively bring that to your attention. For example, Makita's practice is to conduct the capital market expectation study once a year. In years like 2008 or 2020 that saw tremendous volatility, we did it more frequently than once a year. Similarly, if there were changes in inflation that alter expectations or that would cause in our view or that of a staff, they need to revisit asset allocation more frequently, we'll do it. Now, informally at each meeting, in each report, the asset allocation is reviewed. For example, in the CIO report, John Grable mentioned how the various asset classes were within ranges. And if something was appropriate and material, it would be brought to your attention immediately.
And this is Steve McCord. If I could just add one thing, because it relates to the next presentation we're gonna give. Forward-looking market expectations are based in large part on how markets are currently pricing different risk factors. And while there's talk of potential inflation, currently the level of inflation that's being priced in the markets is quite modest. That being said, as part of our asset allocation process, we go through a comprehensive risk assessment, and inflation is one of those risks that we'll be assessing, and we'll be stress testing the portfolio based on, and various portfolios based on a variety of potential inflationary scenarios. So it's part of our normal process of stress testing various policy portfolios.
Chair,
Thank you.
Chair Knox, can I
If I
adjust
could just
member-
add one additional thing from a practical implementation standpoint, you're also going to have ranges around the targets that are established as part of the strategic asset allocation, which does provide you some flexibility in between asset allocation studies to adjust the portfolio to emerging risks or dynamics in the capital markets.
Chair Knox, can I make a comment to Mr. Santos just on policy?
Please.
Okay. So Mr. Santos, just for stated in the IPS, the IPS states that we'll conduct an asset allocation study every 3 years or at the will of the board. So if next year, I hope you don't do this because of the workload, I'm joking aside, you could bring us back next year to conduct another asset allocation study if that's the board's will.
Thank you.
So one thing we can do is maybe just hit a few more key pages if there are no more questions at this time, maybe page 13.
Go ahead.
If we can skip to page 13, please. Thank you. This essentially summarizes the prior 8 pages. It compares the efficient frontier, or essentially the risk and return you get for a variety of asset classes at 2 different points in time. One is at the beginning of 2011, the other is at the beginning of 2021. And so what you see is somewhere between 150 and 200 basis points differential across most asset classes during this time. And you'll see the curve essentially has moved down. So we have lower yields, we have lower inflation, we have higher valuations across most asset classes. All of those things are inputs into the calculation for each of these asset categories. And so that has, if you will, pushed investors to either take on more risk as you move into the right, but you have to take increasingly more risk to generate lesser and lesser expected return. And so that's one of the topics we reviewed in the past few meetings, the barbell approach and maybe having enough defense on the left bottom side and then moving to the right, and maybe some of the mid categories might get somewhat handled. So this point in time is used in building the capital market expectations that you will see later in pages 25 through 27. And the next set of pages provides some more color and a refresher into how, into the process used to arrive at those capital market expectations that are in front of you for your action today. Team, what would you like to add in terms of the next few pages before we arrive at pages 25 through 27?
I would say in the interest of time, we have already really presented a lot of this information. In the fall, we presented to you our interim capital markets expectations, which incorporated a lot of these changes in market dynamics. We also, at the last session, presented these numbers, but not for approval, as part of the presentation that we gave on the overall process that we've been following, where we were working with staff and the board's other consultants to kind of vet each of the category level assumptions. So maybe if there are any specific questions on anything happening within each of these categories, or perhaps we could just move towards the summary pages, show them to you, and then ask for ultimate approval, but I'd look for the board's direction on that.
I have no one in the queue if you'd like to move to the summary pages.
So here overall is the return and risk data across major categories here. You know, as we have pointed out, these have come down somewhat from past years, but you'll see the 10-year expected return column is what we're using for the modeling inputs, and the 20-year expected return is what we're proposing to use to approve on a reasonableness basis and compare with what your actuary Milliman would be using for their longer term expectations. So you can note for most of the categories, the 20-year expected return is somewhat higher than it is for our 10-year expected return. The 10-year piece is driven primarily by models only, and the 20-year expected return has some mean reverting elements to the model in the 11 to 20-year period, and also takes more of it looks at a risk premia approach and looks at what those risk premia by asset category are on a historic basis to arrive at those numbers. And we think this is a good approach for balancing the current risks in the capital markets, but also making sure that the portfolio is still angled in a very long-term perspective towards what your actuarial or return target is. Maybe skipping to the next page. Here's some additional, we had talked about the one thing I want to really point out here is as far as hedge funds, Makita puts together its own hedge fund composite, which we publish. We also have 8 different categories of hedge funds that live underneath that, where we provide capital markets expectations. What we're going to be using for this exercise or proposing that you approve is a custom hedge fund composite. We worked with Alborn to construct using some of our underlying components in different weights than what we typically put in our hedge fund basket that more accurately reflect LACERA's implementation and future implementation plans within hedge funds. Other than that, all of these expectations are the exact same as what we would be using for other clients and what we broadly published, as Leo said, at the end of January. And then lastly, down the bottom, just maybe touching on Mr. Santos's point, you can see we do have a slightly higher short-term expectation for inflation, which then again moderates in the 20-year period. Some of this is reflected in capital markets currently, but there is also on the longer term, we're facing some major demographic shifts, which we think ultimately mute longer term inflation expectations. And then the
Mr.
next
Santos in the queue for a quick question.
Sure, go right ahead.
You're muted, Mr. Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. In fact, I was just going to ask a question on this particular correlation table. Could you go over that and pretty much looking at private equity? So private equity, it is negative correlated to long-term government bonds. Am I reading that correctly? I mean, what does this table tells me?
Yes, you're absolutely reading that correctly. So private equity, just starting on the left part of the table here, you can see -10 to long-term government bonds. Long-term government bonds are generally considered a highly defensive asset category, especially in an environment where they have incredibly low historic yields. So you would expect to see that. And if you just follow that along, once you get under to US equity, you note that private equity has a correlation of 0.85. So nearly moving in lockstep, as you would expect with public equities, but in an inverse manner to a very defensive asset category like long-term government bonds.
So this really tells us the value of diversity or diversification, I should say.
100%. Yep, okay, exactly right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so even while long-term government bonds and the capital markets expectations may look like they have return expectations that won't contribute significantly to your portfolio, they do have a role as a diversifier and as a defensive asset category that you can utilize.
That's a different presentation, Herman.
That's next month. And so with that, I think we can stand for any other questions and would maybe ask if there's interest in advancing these for approval.
Thank you very much. I do not have anybody in the queue. I'm happy to entertain a motion on staff's recommendations.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Santos.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Oakham. Any other discussion? Linda, please call the roll.
Sure. Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Santos?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Oakham,
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
okay, and Ms. Chair Knox.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. 8B, recommendation submitted by Mr. Grable, CIO, and Jude Perez, Principal Investment Officer, that the board ratify. There's 3 elements of TIDE. They label the collective efforts to advance inclusion, diversity, and equity through this LACERA TIDE effort. Number 2, LACERA continue to pursue a comprehensive multi-pronged approach organized under LACERA TIDE, including 5 core pillars. And lastly, LACERA's TIDE activities, progress, and trend lines be presented to the BOI for oversight, review, and input on an annual basis. Mr. Grable?
Sorry, I should unmute myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the packet, you have a memo, this presentation, as well as TIDE presentations from September and December, an emerging manager program update from January. And this topic was agendized for potential Board of Investment ratification of LACERA's multiple and longstanding DEI initiatives. Robert, if we could turn to slide 3, please. And as the chair said, we're asking the board to adopt 3 things. First is the name LACERA TIDE to serve as a moniker for our various DEI initiatives. The second item is that we recognize that TIDE is comprehensive and has multiple touch points in our activities. In the prior presentations, we identified the 5 pillars, which the chair just articulated. And the third aspect is that we ask that the board ratify an annual update on the comprehensive efforts under this umbrella. Next slide, please. This slide has some details about the 5 pillars. We arranged them from left to right to reflect the degree of influence we have over various initiatives. For example, internal practices are wholly within our control, hence they are on the left. Other pillars are no less important and may serve as motivation given that they're more difficult. The next series of slides provide a recap of the pillars and the near-term objectives discussed at the December Board of Investments meeting. Just about every person in the investment division is working on one of the teams for each of these 5 pillars. Each team is advancing concrete actions and deliverables for that pillar. Everyone has also increased DEI factors into portfolio oversight with respect to new and existing relationships. So we all can speak to LACERA TIDE, but we all can't speak given this forum. So Jude and Scott, I asked them to provide some updates on the individual pillars, but that's pending the direction of the chair and trustees. So we can go through those slides or we could stand for questions.
I have Mr. Kelly in the queue. Why don't we start there?
Thank you. Thank you, John. I think the presentation is great. I also think the program is great. I actually think it's like award-winning great. And my question is, are there any industry initiatives or kind of agencies that acknowledge and reward development of best practices in this area to which you can submit the program and get an award? I really do think it's award winning. So that's my question.
Well, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Kelly. I will share with the board, and we may have shared it under separate cover, that ILPA, which is the Institutional Limited Partner Association, it's a umbrella organization for investors in private equity. David Simpson has served on their diversity in action committee. They have an initiative, and for their last meeting, our December TIDE presentation was circulated to all participants in it, and David and I spoke at that. So we are keeping a list, and I apologize for the noise in the background. I'm also in the office today. we are hopefully, when we present the annual update in November, we're keeping a running list of all the presentations that we're making on these various efforts. I know that I'm speaking in a bunch of forums over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully that the award-winning nature of this is only improves, that we'll look back years from now and say, well, we were off to a good start, but it's only gotten better. So I think that when I think about LACERA Tide, I think that each subsequent day should be our best day yet. So I don't know if that's a sufficient answer, but I think that the best is yet to come.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I have Ms. Sanchez next, followed by Mr. Bernstein.
So first of all, I really appreciated the presentation and have appreciated them as they've been going. I think one of the elements that I would love to focus on, maybe not in this meeting, but at some point in the future, is that industry advocacy pillar, because that requires the most collaboration with other organizations. And I think that there are also grassroots efforts by various entities that gather under different umbrellas like ILPA or like CII that are actually pushing either at the corporate level for greater disclosure or with the SEC directly, now that the SEC is friendlier towards these ideas, and trying to push even legislative efforts to mandate certain disclosures that would make our lives easier to collect information in those middle three pillars where we have a harder time collecting information at times because of a lack of disclosure. And just a reminder that I also sit on the DEI efforts for PRI. And I think that when we look at sort of collecting, and we've had conversations, John, about the World Economic Forum and their kind of advocacy around this space. And I think there are a lot of conversations that are happening, and the degree to which we can sort of help figure out how many other entities we can align with our perspective and push for greater disclosure at the regulatory level, and also efforts at various corporate levels. I think that makes this process better for us. And I know that this is probably already envisioned, but that kind of inventory keeping, I think, will be key and important.
And Mr. Chair, if I can respond.
Please.
We agree wholeheartedly. I think it's incumbent upon us to address that in a twofold manner. First is to identify organizations such as the PRI that are goal aligned with us, that see things similarly, to amplify our voice, that with like-minded organizations and investors, we can amplify our voice in a way we can't do it alone. We also have to work with those that may have different views and push them and prod them to recognize that this is our view, this is our capital, and we think that it is in our fiduciary interest to contemplate and include in our analysis factors beyond just historical risk and returns, because once again, for us to optimize our outcomes, we need to do that. So I think that we need to work with as many organizations as possible. We are keeping an inventory, a list of organizations, and we are looking to not just keep a list, but to get involved in those organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. I have Mr. Bernstein.
Thank you, Chair Knox. John and all the staff, I'm so glad for the comments that have been made so far. I'm probably just going to add to them. I was one of the people who asked that this be brought forth for ratification. I'm glad that it has been, but I'm especially glad that it sort of is turning into a victory lap for staff, because this is wonderful work, and it should be recognized as such. I want to just state, as we move towards ratification, that one of the things that I think is particularly astute and clever about how this is designed is that the pillars really speak to our values without getting into too much detail about who our colleagues will be, what our diversity metrics will be. I mean, in diversity, it's been wonderful to sort of see an expansion, starting with sort of critical, race and gender, and including LGBTQ, and starting to talk about things like disability and military service. I really admire the elegance of how this is set up so that our values can largely remain consistent while acknowledging that as time goes on, what we're trying to accomplish and who we're trying to accomplish with are likely to continue evolving. So I just think it's a really good document. I think it's clear that staff has already been very excited about it. I'm hoping that our ratification will make it even easier for staff to push LACERA tide and use it to try to influence other decision makers. And so if the chair would allow, it would be my pleasure to move staff recommendation for ratification.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Bernstein. I have Mr. Santos in the queue, but is there a second?
I will second that.
Mr. Santos will second. Mr. Santos.
Thank you. Just Mr. Grable, to add to what Ms. Sanchez mentioned with regards to industry advocacy, I wholeheartedly support that. I mean, it's important, and I think that's why it's important to have us as an organization participate in ICGN, the Asian Corporate Governance Association, and others. I think it's really important that we be part of those organizations at the international level. Like, I will encourage someone to get involved at the level 20 in Europe. As a private equity association, they are concerned with not having women in private equity. You also have, and I want to take the opportunity to compliment Mr. Davis and Scott Dreisel. Mr. Simpson is not only that he's involved with ELPA, but also involved with the Colombian Association of Private Equity. And in particular, he's going to be a speaker, I believe, next month to the Pacific Island countries that is sponsored by the Private Equity Association in Colombia. Also in Colombia, they have the Women in Private Equity. So a lot of these international associations, I think it's really important that we take the opportunity to participate in them. They're complementary, they are aware of the work that we do. And that's why, at least with the Colombian Private Equity Association, they reached out to me because they're really impressed. They've seen what Mr. Simpson presented at the ILPA group. So it's fascinating to see, and I really want to encourage and compliment the staff who take the time to be involved. And also, perhaps we should encourage our consultants, like Stepstone and others, to also be part of those organizations, because that will enhance their ability to advise us. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other trustees in the queue. I would just add my appreciation to Mr. Grable and the rest of the team, Scott and Jude. I thought it was excellent. As we had discussed, John, I mean, there's a lot of things your team had been working on all along, and it's nice to see these all packaged into one area that, again, we'll see on an annual basis in terms of progress, new trends, et cetera. So we don't just consider this a one and done. So thank you very much. With that, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion before Linda calls the roll?
I third.
Ms. Sanchez will third. Go ahead, Linda, call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos,
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Oka,
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Yes.
Chair Knox.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We are on to item C under non-consent, recommendation by Mr. Masaragian, Principal Investment Officer, and Chad Timko, Senior Investment Officer, that the board authorize the CIO to rebalance among board-approved illiquid credit mandates when the conditions identified on slide 5 of the attached presentation are met. And we have a memo in the packet dated February 26th, and the presentation's up on the screen.
Move approval of staff recommendation.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I second that.
I have a second by, I heard somebody before Mr. Oakham. Was that you, Mr. Green?
Yes. It's Mr. Kelly.
Oh, Mr. Kelly. Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or a wish to review the presentation? Hearing none. Linda, please call the roll.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Oakham, Mr. Oakham. Okay. Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Yes.
Mr. Knox.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We are on to reports, item A. And just as a reminder, Makita's presentation was inadvertently left out of the agenda packet, so the presentation can be found as a green folder item. So Mr. Perez, would you like to kick things off on the strategic asset allocation liability overview before we hear from Makita?
Yes, please, Chair Knox. In this presentation, different from the one this morning, Makita will cover an overview of the asset liability study. The presentation will also highlight the various analysis that can be used as part of an asset allocation study. This includes frameworks such as mean variance optimization, scenario analysis, stress testing, and climate impact, just to name a few. These frameworks will be used in LACERA's asset allocation study with the objective to measure risk through different lenses and help set expectations, because there is not a single framework that can give us a complete picture of the risks we face as investors. So the goal is to use a variety of tools and help LACERA meet its objective as we continue this asset allocation study. So with that background, I'd like to hand it over to Stephen McCourt and Alina Yuan from Makita.
Thanks, Jude. This is Steve McCourt, and I'll begin. This asset liability study aligns with LACERA's very first investment belief that long-term strategic asset allocation will be the primary determinant of LACERA's risk and return outcomes. If we flip to slide 2 in the presentation, I want to highlight that this presentation highlights various analyses Makita customarily conducts as part of our asset allocation review process. In the aggregate, these analyses allow LACERA to view risk and return more holistically and through a lens specific to the risks and issues that matter to the board. Slide 3, please. This slide shows the expected time frame of reviewing asset allocation policy. Today, we reviewed the 2021 capital market expectations and are now reviewing the asset liability study process. In April, we intend to share with the board several initial policy portfolios and risk analytics associated with those policies. After receiving feedback from the board, we expect to come back in May with a refined set of policy options. The board may choose to approve a policy portfolio in May, or we may conduct additional analysis based on feedback from the board and bring final policies back in June, along with addressing appropriate benchmarking for each of the approved policies. It's important to note that this is your process. We're happy to proceed at a pace and a level of detail that works best for you as the board. Moving on to slide 4. As we've said many times, asset allocation is likely to have the largest impact of any investment decision the board makes over time. At its core, asset allocation is the process of accepting and managing both long-term risk and opportunity. As you go through this process, consider that return expectations are, by their nature, uncertain. We and others do our best to set objective, unbiased return expectations for each asset class in each policy portfolio. But with humility, we acknowledge that predicting the future is really, really challenging. However, risk is ever present in the capital markets, despite the experience of the last few months. And estimates of future risk are generally more stable over time. In other words, the relative future risk across asset classes we estimate with a high degree of confidence. where future returns we estimate with much less confidence. We flip to slide 5. On this slide, we highlight that risk is multifaceted. It has many dimensions. Consequently, instead of relying on a single tool to evaluate risk, Makita uses a multitude of tools, some of which Alina will review on the following slides.
Thanks, Steve. Next slide, please. So mean variance optimization is really the traditional starting point for determining asset allocation, and it uses 3 main inputs, including expected return, risk, and expected correlations to really mathematically determine the risk efficient portfolios. MVO is where we begin to understand the trade-off between risk and return. It's universally utilized. It has a lot of benefits, but it does have pitfalls. 3 in particular I wanted to mention today. First would be imprecision. If your CMAs are imprecise, then the outputs of your models are also going to be imprecise. And by definition, because we don't have a crystal ball, we need to practice humility, as Steve had mentioned before, with understanding that our model, like all models, will face uncertainties when predicting future returns and risks. Second is that most NVO models assumes normality in return distributions, but in actuality, CMAs are really not normally distributed. They tend to have fat tails, which means that there are higher incidence of outliers on either the very positive or negative sides, and mean variance tends to underestimate the severity of those downside events. And third would be that MVO really only focuses on a singular definition of risk, that being standard deviation. So it doesn't really capture a lot of the other risks, like liquidity risk, for example. And so recognizing these challenges, we will look at a variety of tools beyond MVO to really measure risk in the portfolio. Next slide, please. The first tool we'll take a look at for risk analysis is value at risk. Value at risk does use MVO analytics to measure the potential worst case outcomes in both percentage and dollar values. And again, like all MVO based analytics, it does tend to underestimate the likelihood and severity of downside risks. Next slide, please. We'll also take a look at risk budgeting. Assessing the different components of risk budgeting can help investors to really understand the aggregate risk of a portfolio by different asset classes, as you can see here in this example slide. For any portfolio that's really focused on achieving those long-term returns for long periods of time, equity risk will be one of the dominant risks in the portfolio. Next slide, please. We'll also take a look at historical performance. History provides a robust data set of capital market risks, and it allows us to predict how different policy portfolios would have performed if these environments repeated themselves. And even though history does not repeat, it often does rhyme. So reviewing the behavior of policy portfolios throughout the historical market events provides a more robust view of risk above MVO analytics. Next slide, please. In addition to evaluating historical returns, it's also prudent to measure those potential future events. And because many of the risks that could impact LACERA in the future have not happened in the past, we also create stress tests of different portfolios. And we're able to customize a lot of these stress tests for a wide variety of risks impacting long-term investors. Some which were mentioned earlier today is taking inflation as a risk and seeing how the portfolio measures up against different inflation shocks, also rising interest rates, credit shocks, US dollar strengthening, equity market declines, etc. And we'll also be incorporating climate change as a risk factor to stress test these different potential portfolio options. And I'll hand it back to Steve to cover more about the models.
So if we could move to slide 11. Because asset allocation models generally fall in love with private market asset classes due to their superior risk and return characteristics and don't incorporate liquidity risk in a robust way, Makita separately conducts a liquidity analysis to determine how much illiquidity the investment portfolio can accept before liquidity risk becomes a significant concern. In the liquidity stress test, we assume an intermediate term negative capital market environment occurs, while LACERA needs to continue to pay benefits, expenses, and rebalance its portfolio over time. Next slide, please. The The output of the liquidity stress test measures how much of the portfolio remains liquid in a 5-year negative market environment after satisfying all cash and rebalancing requirements. Slide 13, please. Most defined benefit plans today are mature, meaning that they pay out more in benefits and expenses than they collect in contributions. This means that cash leaves the portfolio every year. When meaningful levels of cash leave a portfolio, there's the potential that the true dollar-weighted return of the portfolio can differ from the time-weighted return estimate that's measured customarily in the investment industry. The consequence is that the sequence of returns matters. For a portfolio like LACERA, the amount of capital that LACERA has in 20 years could differ significantly depending on the timing of returns. If the portfolio returns 7% per year over 20 years, but experience negative returns at the beginning of the period and more favorable returns later on, it will have far less money than if the more favorable returns occurred first. The reason for this is that if the market lost value, LACERA would still have to spend cash out of its portfolio, leaving fewer assets available to invest once the market performance turned around. This represents another dimension of risk for defined benefit plans, and the sequence of returns analysis is another analysis we conduct as part of our process. If we move to slide 14. In addition to some of the top-down analyses that I've gone through, Makita also conducts simulation analysis to get us away from the top-down models like MVO. So we can look at the relationship across a multitude of factors that drive capital market outcomes. Like other types of analysis, simulations allow us to view risk in a more holistic way. Let's move 2 slides over to slide 16. As part of our asset allocation review, we'll be stress testing the portfolio based on potential climate change scenarios, as we've discussed. And these scenarios could impact the portfolios in 3 broad ways: through physical damage caused by the consequences of climate change, through public policy changes that change the status quo of energy production and consumption, and through technological changes likely to result from the challenges of climate change. Turning to slide 17, which we've reviewed with this board last year.
Steve, I had a question.
Yep.
It's Joe Kelly. Going back to the previous slide, is this the first time you're incorporating these climate change scenarios?
It is. Climate change stress testing was not part of the asset allocation review when it was last done.
And have you performed them with other clients, and generally what have you found?
We have, and it's increasingly becoming a common practice in the industry to include them. And if we move to slide 17, I'll give you a preview of what we find. It's interesting. We stress test portfolios in 2 different ways. One, assuming that the climate warms more than what is expected, and also one where the climate warms less than expected. Interestingly, the average outcome for most risk asset classes is that portfolios do, on average, a little worse in both cases. The reason they do worse in higher warming scenarios tends to be related to volatility and uncertainty associated with a warmer planet. The more interesting outcome is in the scenarios that involve less warming. The assumption in those scenarios is that the climate warms less because of significant public policy changes that reduce carbon emissions, and those public policy changes impact certain sectors of the market quite significantly, like energy. So the changes are, I would say, as you can see from this slide here, they represent a range of possible outcomes. So it's not as if, of course, anyone knows for certain how asset classes will behave in different levels of climate change, but they do provide clues on what the magnitude of impact might be. And for other clients that have gone through this process, it generally has resulted in tilting portfolios somewhat away from areas that are more exposed to climate change. And in the case of LACERA, that might be an area like natural resources.
Thank you, Steve.
So why don't I then hand it back over to Alina to finish this up.
Thanks, Steve. Next slide, please. Thank you. So finally, Makita will be quantifying the board's preferences with respect to asset allocation policy. As you may recall, in 2020, we surveyed the trustees on 5 different objectives to really understand the goal of improving outcomes that are most important to the BOI. And we presented those results at the November BOI meeting. And now we will take those rankings from the survey and quantify them in order to really help guide our portfolio selection process and really frame those optimization parameters moving forward. And that brings me to our last slide. We're happy to take any questions, but otherwise we look forward to presenting the results of the study at the next meeting.
Thank you very much, Alina and team. Are there any questions from trustees? There's no one in the queue. I'm not seeing anybody pop up. Thank you all very much. Appreciate the information. Okay, item B, we have Form 700 training. Mr. Rice?
Yes, good morning. We have as our trainers today, Karen Getman and Kelly Liang from one of our fiduciary counsel law firms, Olson Remcho. They are both experts in this area and practice in the field. Karen is the former chair of the FPPC, the Fair Political Practices Commission, which oversees the Form 700 regulatory framework. And Kelly interned at the commission and also currently has part of his law practice counsels clients on Form 700 issues. They're going to give training that relates to the requirements that apply to Board of Investments trustees, which are different than the requirements that apply to Board of Retirement trustees. So for those of you who were there earlier for the Board of Retirement training, there will be some new information here. They're going to provide general information. The purpose of this training is not for them to provide individual counseling. They will entertain questions, of course, but as fiduciary counsel, each of you are free to contact them individually, or you can contact Joe Rowell or me or Margot McCabe in the LACERA legal office with questions about the law or the process associated with Form 700s. We are going to take about 15 minutes or so for the training and leave about 15 minutes or so for questions, but we're flexible on both of those and want to make sure that the training is of value to you. So with that, I will turn it over to Karen.
Good morning, everybody. And if you could flip to the next slide, we'll talk about what this is going to be. Again, it's going to be an overview that talks about not only how to fill out your Form 700, but why you have to fill out a Form 700. We will go through some specific parts of the Form 700, and I believe you have a blank form in your materials. It may be helpful to follow along as we're doing that. And more importantly, we're going to give you some tips and guidance based on what we've seen in some of your past filings and alert you to some potential traps that you may not be aware of. And then finally, give you resources if you need further assistance. So the next slide, please. As you know, as public officials, you are subject to the Political Reform Act's conflict of interest provisions. And those provisions say that you as public officials may not make, participate in, or attempt to influence a governmental decision that may have a material financial impact on one of your financial interests. The Form 700 is the place where you designate what your financial interests are. And that serves two purposes. It alerts the public to when a governmental decision might have an impact on one of your financial interests. And just as importantly, it alerts you so that when you're going through the process of filling out your Form 700, we hope that you won't make it just a rote exercise, but you'll use it as an opportunity to really reflect on and educate yourself on the types of financial interests that you have that might cause you to question whether you need to recuse from the decision in the upcoming year. The next slide, please. The Form 700 is a document that's filled out by just about everybody who's employed by government and anything other than a ministerial or clerical role. It's also filled out by consultants who participate in the government decision process. And so as a fiduciary counsel to the board, I'm required to fill out a Form 700. It is going to apply because you are 87-200 filers, which Kelly will explain in a little bit more detail going forward. You're going to have the broadest disclosure categories among people in the state.
Good morning. So as Karen mentioned, as trustees on the Board of Investments, you qualify as 87-200 filers, more specifically your public officials who manage public investments. And so you're required to disclose all investments, business entities, real property, income, gifts, and travel payments. Keep in mind that this, as LACERA board members, a lot of the interests that I mentioned are only reportable if they have some connection to LA County, since that's your jurisdiction. For those of you who do hold other positions requiring you to file a Form 700, you may be required to disclose those same types of investments, but for other jurisdictions. You're permitted to file the same expanded Form 700 for all of your offices instead of preparing one for each position, but that means the Form 700 must include the required disclosures for all of your positions, i.e. all of your jurisdictions. Next slide, please.
You file your annual statement on April 1st of every year, so that's coming up now. If you leave office this coming year, you will need to file a leaving office statement within 30 days of leaving office. You file with your agency, which can connect you to the electronic filing system that the County of Los Angeles has. You need to understand that your form is available for the members of the public to see. They don't even have to make a Public Record Act request to see it. Anybody's allowed to see a Form 700 for any public official in the state of California. You have to file on time. The late filing penalty is $10 a day up to a maximum of $100, but more importantly, late filing or a failure to file or an incomplete filing can result in a referral to the Fair Political Practices Commission's Enforcement Division. And if they decide to bring an enforcement action against you, that's a potential fine of $5,000 per violation. You sign these documents under penalty of perjury. So again, these are your personal obligations as a public official, and those are the penalties that you may be subject to on a personal basis if you fail to file or don't fully disclose your interests. The next slide, please.
So next we'll go over the actual form itself. As mentioned earlier, we recommend following along with the blank form that was distributed. As you know, the cover page is relatively straightforward. Our recommendation is actually to fill out the cover page last after completing the rest of the form, so that the selected schedules and the page numbers indicated on the form are accurate. Having the wrong information could give the impression that the form is missing a schedule and missing pages, which of course we don't want. And then lastly, as mentioned earlier, for those of you who are filing for multiple offices and would like to file a single expanded statement, please remember to actually list all of your offices. Next slide, please. So the first schedule is Schedule A1. A1 and A2 both cover investments, but A1 covers investments where you have an interest of less than 10%. So usually that means stocks or bonds, as opposed to a business in which you have sole ownership of or where you're a partner in. As members on the investment board, you are required to disclose investments in any businesses that are located in LA County, doing business in LA County, or are planning to do business or have done business in the last 2 years in LA County. So doing business in the jurisdiction is defined very broadly to mean having any type of business contacts on a regular basis with someone that's located within the jurisdiction. Given the size of LA County, it means that almost all publicly traded companies would have customers, clients, vendors, distributors, or other kinds of business contacts. So we recommend disclosing all of your investment interests. As you probably know, for interests that do fall into that disclosure category, the interest is still only reportable on the Form 700 if the interest is valued at $2,000 or more at some time during the reporting period. This includes interests that are held by you, your spouse, registered domestic partner, or dependent children. We'll discuss this in a bit more detail later, but please keep in mind that the concept of community property and separate property agreements apply to income and not investments or real property.
I have a question for Mr. Kelly before you move on.
Sure.
I have a question on this slide here. These investments are investments you hold as of the date you complete the form, correct?
So it depends on the report you're filling out. Generally, we're focusing on the annual report. So it'd be any assets, or in this case, for this schedule, investments held during the prior calendar year.
So if I held it and sold it within the same calendar year, am I required to report that?
Yes, if you meet the reporting threshold, you would indicate both the acquired date and the disposed of date on the report.
Okay, I don't think that's been always clear enough to me in terms of the instructions in the booklet. I'll just share, because I think, and I've known a lot of people who will trade throughout the year, and they do not include that trading activity because they haven't held the position at the reporting period, at the time they've completed the form. And I said, but wait a second, go back to the original purpose, which is you need to determine, you're providing this information for someone to determine if you had a conflict. You could have been involved in a decision at the point at which you sold the stock. But I don't think that's always clear that it is for the entire prior annual period, just as an observation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Next slide, please. So just like A1, A2 requires a disclosure of interests held by you, your spouse, registered domestic partner, or dependent children, but only if the interest is 10% or greater, and that interest happens to be worth $2,000 or more. However, unlike A1, because this schedule involves investments in which you have a greater interest, you also have to disclose information about the business entity itself. So that includes property that's held by the entity and income sources of $10,000 or more to the entity. So that includes their customers or their clients. Next slide, please. Schedule B covers real property. Real property in this case will have to be disclosed if the property is worth $2,000 or more and located within 2 miles of LA County, as well as property located within 2 miles of any property owned or used by LACERA. Please keep in mind that property that's used exclusively as a personal residence is exempt from disclosure. However, if you rent out a bedroom, then that exception would no longer apply and your personal residence would need to be disclosed. With regard to home office deductions, again, the personal residence exception wouldn't apply because it's no longer being used exclusively as a personal residence. However, you don't actually have to disclose on your Form 700 unless the value of that deduction is $2,000 or more. If you have any specific questions on this exception, we recommend that you check in with counsel. Next slide, please. And then Schedule C concerns the disclosure of income of $500 or more during the period from sources that are located in, doing business in, planning to do business in, or have done business in LA County in the last 2 years. Again, because the definition of doing business in the jurisdiction is broad, it is likely that a given income source is considered to be doing business in LA County and would have to be disclosed. There are exceptions that may apply. For example, income from governmental entities is not reportable. In addition, unlike investments, the concept of community property and separate property apply to income, such that if a particular source of income is your spouse's separate property, then it would not be reportable. If it is community property, your pro rata share would only be half, meaning that you would divide it by half to determine if it's even reportable. And if it is, you would only be disclosing half of that total amount.
I have Mr. Bernstein in the queue with a question followed by Mr. Kelly.
I had a question about home disclosure, and Ms. Getman, Mr. Lang, maybe a question for you, maybe a question for our counsel, but given the reality that we have been at least threatened with protests at our homes, has there been any consideration given to the ethics of mandating that we publish our home address on this report, particularly when it's not providing revenue?
So
and I would note that you said that a home office declaration is sufficient to require reporting, which would seem like a very likely thing to sweep up most trustees, considering that we have to have a home office to do this.
Right. So one of the options is you're permitted to disclose the parcel number instead of your street address, which provides that extra layer of privacy. My understanding is that even with a parcel number, you might still be able to locate a person's actual street address. And we've actually reached out to the FPBC for advice on this to see if they have any kind of option for kind of withholding that information, at least on the Form 700 filing, and perhaps you could send it separately for the purpose of having the records, but then not having it actually on the Form 700. But we have not heard back, and we'll let council know as soon as we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, as the tax collector, I can assure you it's very easy to get an address from an AIN. Mr. Kelly, you're in the queue.
Thank you. A question and a comment. The last bullet here, required to report community property registered partner's income. That is only if the income is earned in the jurisdiction, correct? In other words, if I have a husband who works in Phoenix, Arizona, that income is earned outside the jurisdiction of LA County. And it's not earned by a firm that does business with LA County. So that income is then not reportable at 50%.
Yes, that's right. If you're certain that they're not doing business in LA County, again, the definition is broad. So generally, there's a good chance that they are if they have any kind of customers or any other contacts. But if you're certain that they do not have any contacts at all, then it would not fall under that disclosure category.
Thank you for that. And then my comment to follow up on Mr. Bernstein's question is, the home address is problematic because we do have elected trustees who are safety members. And their home address is restricted under other parts of statute in the state law from reporting. So I wonder how that is. You don't have to answer, but I wonder how that is dealt with.
So let me jump in and help a little bit here. You almost never have to report your home address on your Form 700. You only have to report your home address if your home is in essence a business at some level, because for instance, you're renting it out under Airbnb regulations, or this year in particular, you're going to take a business deduction, a home business deduction for it, and that business deduction is going to be worth $2,000 or more. The FPBC has always had a way in which you can request to withhold certain information if you have a genuine need to withhold it, for instance, a safety concern. There's a procedure for doing that, for writing in and saying there's a specific reason why I cannot report what you want me to, and they can make a determination about that. So if that's a circumstance that anybody faces, we urge you to speak to counsel about that and follow that procedure.
Okay, thank you for that. And then also in terms of just completing the report, we can use the LACERA address as our address. We do not have to list our home address. This is the address.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Ms. Sanchez followed by Mr. Bernstein.
Given that the deadline for this is April 1st, I wonder if Mr. Rice can request, our trustees have actually been verbally threatened during public comment to have people come to our homes. And so we are under constant threat. We actually had to have sheriffs come to our homes for security assessments. So I am naturally concerned about revealing my address. And so it's actually a hot button issue. The fact that I had to have sheriffs come to my home during the Christmas season because we had a verbal threat. And I wonder how quickly that can be expedited, Mr. Rice, for our purposes before the filing deadline.
Yes, we can pursue that, and we'll coordinate with Karen and Kelly on this and submit that as quickly as possible. And we'll discuss with them the ability to withhold the information pending action on the request. You would proceed with the filing, but there may be certain information where we wouldn't, for example, we would not include the address of your home, stating that there is a pending hardship request. But we'll work with Karen and Kelly on that, on the procedure there, but understanding that we will implement it quickly.
Anything else, Ms. Sanchez?
Sorry, thank you. I didn't hear you.
No, did you have any other questions?
Actually, I did. So on, sorry, slide 9, Schedule A2, investments with ownership interest greater than 10%. You mentioned that we have to report any customers or clients that are within Los Angeles County, so not necessarily the full customer list of the entire globe.
Karen, would you mind fielding that one?
If they reach that threshold. But if they could be considered a source of income to you from within the county, then you will report them.
Okay, thanks.
And I just want to point out, it's the pro rata share of the income. So if your interest is only 10%, then you would take their income multiplied by 10% for disclosure purposes.
Thank you. I have Mr. Bernstein next.
Thank you, Chair Knox. Two things. Ms. Sanchez asked or raised my concern, which is why are we not looking for a blanket exemption on address reporting? And I appreciate that staff is going to take this up. I do want to comment, though, that that we are facing tremendous pressure to over-report, that we are trustees of a $65 billion pension fund that is invested around the globe, and it is virtually impossible to rule out the possibility of some of these proximity issues, some of these LA County impacted issues. And I guess I just want to say, just to say it, these are supposed to be meaningful impacts. It's supposed to be material. And yet we are clearly asked to report things that do not amount to de minimis errors against our assets that are being reported and that may have extraordinarily tangential relationships to our county. And I just wish there was some way that we could focus this process in on reporting things that are truly material and ask for some relief from what is clearly, by almost any other understanding of de minimis errors, not material. So in the trenches, we face tremendous pressure to report everything because it's virtually impossible to know exactly where the reach of LACERA and the county ends.
I think that you are certainly not the first person to have expressed that type of concern. The difficulty is that this was an initiative statute, and so it can't be amended by the agency, and it can only be amended by the legislature to further its purposes. So there has, from the start, been a bit of a disconnect, and we'll talk about this a little bit later as well, between what's disclosed and what actually could cause a conflict for anybody. So I'm very sympathetic to your concern, but there is.
And I'm very appreciative of your guidance with one caveat that I don't know that you all appreciate how hard it is to rule out the possibility that you need to include things. The amount of work in discounting reporting is so burdensome that effectively we are arm twisted into reporting anything. And again, I've worked with my colleagues for a decade. They are honorable people. The idea that we should be reporting is solid, but the idea that people are truly going to be bought for a couple of $100s here and there is, that's a disingenuous claim of material impact. And I do realize it does not come from your law firm. I'm just expressing frustration and a wish that we could ask for some relief.
Understood.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. That's all I have in the queue. If you'd like to continue.
Okay, thanks. Next slide, please.
So gifts. This is a source of particular interest for the Fair Political Practices Commission. Gifts are something defined very broadly. So it's anything of value for which you have not provided equal or greater consideration to the donor. That means it's going to be somebody pays for your meal, sends you a bottle of wine during the holidays. Somebody gives you tickets to a play or to a Broadway show or to a movie if you're out on a business trip. All of those things are going to be considered gifts. Gifts have to be reported on your Form 700 if the fair market value of the gift is $50 or more, and if the donor is somebody who you would have had to report as a source of income. In addition, multiple gifts covering totaling $50 or more that are received during the reporting period from a single source must be reported. So it's a cumulative total. If you are taken out to lunch by somebody 3 times during the course of the year, and each time they spend $20 on your lunch, that means it's $60 over the course of the year, and you have to report them as a source of gifts totaling $50 or more. You report the name and address of the individual, also the date and the value and description of the gift. And for that reason, we strongly urge you to keep track during the course of the year of anything that might be a reportable gift, and review that with your counsel when it comes to time to filling out your Form 700 to see what actually has to be reported. I can't urge you enough to take this one seriously. There is a state pension fund that got into quite a bit of trouble, and its officials and staff got into trouble because they were not reporting gifts that they were receiving during business trips. The reason that this came out is because the FPPC had a sense that maybe they weren't reporting everything they should, and it subpoenaed each one of the investment managers who had any connection with that pension fund and made each of them give a list of all the gifts that they had given to somebody who was connected with the agency during the course of the year. The FPPC then matched that against what was actually reported on the Form 700s, where it saw disconnect, it went after them with enforcement cases. So this is something where there is a way to double check, even though you think that there may not be, and the FPPC will in fact double check on a random. So we do urge you to take this seriously. For those of you who are elected officials, you may be asked to solicit donations to a charitable organization. Those are called behested payments, and those are not considered gifts to you. They may be reportable on something called the behested payment report if they reach a certain dollar level. So if you're in that kind of a situation, again, we urge you to seek advice of counsel.
I have Mr. Santos in the queue with a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. I'm not sure if the question is for a general counsel, but I'm going to put it up there in terms of, I think it would be good practice for us to have somebody review and compare 700 forms versus the money managers. Maybe that's a lot of work because we do have a lot of managers that we deal with, but it would be a good idea to do like an audit of the 700 forms and compare them to the managers that we deal with. My understanding is that all managers are required to report any gifts that they provide, dinners or whatever, to people like us. And so it will be, if it's true, it will be easy to correlate and compare just so we can make sure that, that when the time comes, if there's an audit by the government, meaning state or the Fair Political Act, that there's no question as to what was reported. I know the trustees that have been in trouble with with regards to this issue is because the particular manager reported it, and then when it was compared to the 700 form for this particular trustee, there was no such entry, and that created a problem. So any feedback on that from either Mr. Rice or Ms. Getman?
Yes, for my part, Mr. Santos, we are actively engaged in thinking about how we can leverage and better use the information that is in the many Form 700s we collect from trustees, employees, managers, and consultants to identify issues such as the one you're talking about. So that's a suggestion that I've made note of. When we're talking about gifts that are made as opposed to gifts that are received by a manager, we do have contractual provisions in some of our agreements that require disclosure of that sort of thing. And that is another project for review to identify how comprehensive those disclosure requirements are. And if they're not sufficiently, if they don't cover enough of our managers, or if they aren't a standard practice, then that is something to change in our template agreements. So it's a very good point. I thank you for it. We'll report back.
Yeah, last point on that is that, and it should be emphasized that the purpose of doing the audit, so to speak, is not for embarrassment or punishment, but rather to encourage a particular trustee or staff, for that matter, to file an amendment. Because I understand, Ms. Getman, that we can amend the 700 form at any time once it's been filed. So I think it would be good to use that audit to make sure that amendment is filed so that way there's no problems with the authorities.
That's correct, that you can amend your Form 700. I strongly urge you to review with counsel how to do that, when to do that, and when it's appropriate to do that.
Thank you. I have Ms. Sanchez followed by Mr. Oakham.
So first, Mr. Santos, thank you for suggesting that, only because I think every trustee lives in fear of forgetting something. And I know that, Linda keeps great records, and I do my best to forward everything so that I keep a running record, but it's just this constant barrage of process. I have a question, Ms. Getman, about the behested, the comment that you made about behested donations. And I had read an FPPC opinion letter, and that I believe that was on behalf of Fiona Ma, regarding, and that was specifically inquiring about her ability to participate with a nonprofit that she participates on the board of. Is that process reflected in this Form 700 process, or is that a separate process?
It's an entirely separate form that gets filed, the behested payment form. If it's a payment of $5,000 or more that the elected official urged to be given to the charity.
For the elected trustees, we specifically discussed in the preparation of this presentation that we would include the behested payments point. It is a real issue that has arisen for LACERA trustees during my time. Unfortunately, they've been proactive in informing me that they're getting involved in this sort of activity and what are the limits and constraints on their ability to do so. This is an important point, again, for those who are elected and are out there engaged in the community in the way that I know many of you are.
Is there no question in the queue, or should we?
Yes, Mr. Oakham wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I think your annual gift limit is 520 from a single source. Do you have to report, let me see if do you have to report anything under 520 or anything over 520?
You have to report at the $50 level. So anything that accumulates $50 or more over the course of the year gets reported.
Okay, now, if a trustee takes another trustee out to lunch or dinner, where does that fall? So if we decide we want to go out to dinner, trustees, or three of us go to lunch, and one of us picks the tab up, does that have to be reported?
Well, those are the kinds of things that do constitute gifts. So again, I want to encourage you to think about that, to track it, and then discuss with council whether you need to report that on your form.
So you don't know the answer to that question.
Well, it depends, right? So is it a?
Why don't you give us an answer so we have a general idea what depends?
So sometimes things like that, business meetings or lunches may be reimbursed by your employer because it's part of it's an ordinary business expense, at which point it's not a gift. If it is truly you're taking somebody else out to dinner, and let's maybe move to the next slide because there are some exceptions to gifts. So for instance, meals from family members, gifts from family members are not reported. Gifts that are returned within 30 days are not reported. One of the exceptions that's not listed here that's common is if you have a practice of taking your friend out on their birthday and they take you out on your birthday every year, that kind of mutual every year exchange is not a gift. So gifts, I don't mean to be difficult about this, but everything in the FPPC world is defined and defined in a way that you might have an exception. And so that's why I urge you on that kind of specific question to always consult with your counsel and see if it's something that's reportable or if there's an exception that applies.
All right, if in fact I want to give a gift because somebody did me a major favor who works for LACERA, and I mean, it's not a huge gift, am I allowed to do that?
You're always allowed to give a gift if it's not over the limit. The question is whether it's a reportable gift and whether that's an issue for them.
Okay,
There
so
may be other LACERA policy issues associated with that. We can discuss that separately.
Okay, you got it. Thank you.
I want to bring up one other common exception. If you are invited by a nonprofit to attend their fundraiser because they want you there for whatever reason, you can accept the ticket to that fundraiser. That's fine. That's not a gift. But if one of your friends buys a table at that fundraiser and offers you a seat at the table that they bought, then in fact that is a gift and that's going to be reportable. The next slide, please.
And one question. I'm going to make one comment.
Sure.
Don't accept any gifts. Then you don't have any problems.
You know, the 4 years
make,
of their political practice as chair, I did not accept any gifts for that very
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. The good news is the next two slides we're going to skip over very quickly. They have to do with payments for travel, and we're informed by LACERA that they pay for your travel expenses, which is terrific because that means that it's nothing that you have to worry about reporting on your form. I just want to alert you to the fact that if you find yourself in a situation where you are traveling for LACERA and somebody else is paying for your travel, then you do need to talk to counsel about that beforehand and make sure that it complies with the many, many rules and regulations about travel payments. So we can skip to the next slide and the one after that.
Actually,
If you could pause
can
quickly,
you go
Ms.
back?
Sanchez is in the queue.
Yeah, can you just go back to slide 14?
Sure.
Does this only involve travel for LACERA?
If somebody is paying for you to travel personally, then you have to consider whether that's a gift.
No, I don't mean for gifts. What I mean is this only is with respect to travel on behalf of LACERA, not
Yes.
my personal like private travel to Hawaii.
Right.
That nobody paid for except me.
Right. That's correct. You don't have to report that. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's skip to the slide that's tips and at the top. I believe that's 17. Kelly, you want to take that?
Yep. So next we'll go over some practical tips, many of which we came up with based on a review of the prior filed Form 700s. The first is to just simply fill out all fields related to reportable interests. It seems like a no-brainer, but it's actually very easy to overlook some fields or think it's inapplicable at first glance. So the key is just to remember to double check that all of the required fields are filled out. Next is for retirement assets held in retirement accounts, you would report them as if you held them directly. The retirement account itself does not need to be disclosed. Next is something we've mentioned before, but it's an important exception in that salary and other similar payments from a government agency are not reportable. So that applies to your income as well as your pro rata share of your spouse's income if the income is coming from a government agency. And then lastly, just checking for redundant reporting. Generally, information that's disclosed on an earlier schedule doesn't have to be disclosed again on a later one. For example, if you disclose income received from a business entity you own on Schedule A2, you don't also have to disclose that income on Schedule C. The exception would be income from, say, stock or bonds, but the form specifically tells you to also disclose it on Schedule C. So where there's instruction, then you obviously would follow that. To provide an example, let's say you receive rental income from a property you own. If the property is located in LA County, then you report both the property and the rental income on Schedule B. If the property is located outside of LA County, but the renter who provides you with that income does business in LA County, then you will leave the property off of Schedule B and then include that income on Schedule C. So then there's that difference there depending on the situation. Next slide, please.
Question on this slide. I thought in terms of retirement accounts, for example, deferred compensation accounts, if you don't have control over the investment of those assets into specific common stocks, you're investing in a target date fund, for example, then those assets were not reportable.
Yes, that's right. So things like mutual funds would not be reportable. It's when your retirement account holds reportable assets that you would disclose those reportable assets as if you held them directly.
Even if I'm not responsible for making the investment?
I think in those cases, it may be considered a non-reportable investment. Again, the specifics we would recommend checking in with counsel.
Yeah, that's important because if we do have to report all the equity, all the holdings of the target date fund, 2050, we have to get that from our third-party administrator. I mean, it's just crazy.
Target date 2050 is considered a mutual fund. So you're not going to report any assets that are held by that target date fund. That's a mutual.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's important. Thank you.
Yeah, real quick question. What about gold or silver? Does that have to be reported as an asset?
I don't think I've ever been asked that question. My guess is it does, but we'd have to get back to you on that one. Unless Kelly knows. Kelly, do you know?
Well, when you say gold or silver, I assume it's as an investment in that's investing in gold and silver, not gold and silver literally. So I believe it is reportable.
Owning coins, $20 gold.
You mean literally?
Owning physical assets of coins, gold or silver, or maybe some investment coins.
That's a good question. I think that's something we would want to get back to you on, double check.
Would you please get back to Steve, and then Steve, can you call me? Because we got to get this done quickly.
Yes. Trustee Oakham, we'll get back to you on that.
Thank you, Steve.
Let's get to the next slide, which is potential.
Is there practically ever an issue from over-reporting? If you put rental income on both A2 and B, and it turned out you only needed to put it on one, does that matter?
It doesn't matter from the sense that what's important is you reported it and you disclosed it. So from the FPPC's point of view, they really want you to disclose it. The only thing is whether it's going to create some confusion if somebody's looking at your form that, do you have double the income that you think that you actually do, that kind of thing. So it's really a question of, are you creating a confusion that you don't want to create?
One other question, which you have here, if you own less than 10% of a property, but the property produces more than $10,000, do you have to report that?
So by property, you're talking about real property, and you're talking with regard to income, you're talking about, like, say, rental income, correct?
Yes, yes.
So for property, the 10% threshold doesn't apply as long as the property, your interest in the property is 10% or greater, and then you would have to report income associated with that property. The 10% threshold applies to business entities, so it would be a little bit different if the property was held not by you directly, but by a business entity in which you have a 10% or greater interest.
So if an LLC is under 10%, under 10%, you don't have to report it. Is that correct?
I'm going to stop you there because asking questions at this level of specificity, I think is something that should be done with council after we get through the program. And I'll tell you why. One of the things on this slide that you'll see, which is potential traps for the unwary, are things like LLCs, blind trusts, separate property agreements. Those are very complicated issues under the disclosure rules and really depend on the specifics of, for instance, how something is held and the percentages and things like that. And so those are the areas where you really do have to discuss them with council and discuss them in terms of your specifics, not a general discussion for a public meeting.
I think most people who own property, they're owned in an LLC. I mean, I think that's normal. I'm talking about investment property.
Right, and I
So-
think, Mr. Oakham, as Mr. Rice mentioned at the beginning, there is an opportunity for every one of us to outreach to council individually to get that level of clarity. I think if there's an umbrella answer that would be helpful for everybody. I know you're also on a little bit of a short time frame, so I want to make sure we get through the presentation.
You got it. Okay. Okay. You got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oakham. Ms. Sanchez, did you have something quick that you wanted to ask about?
Yes, Ms. Getman, you mentioned that there was a process for amendment should it be required. Is there some kind of resource we can go to understand what that process looks like?
There's actually a form, an amendment form that the FEPC publishes, and what you do is you file the particular schedule that needs a change, and you file it with a cover sheet. That's an amendment. So that's pretty clear, and certainly your council will be able to walk you through how to do that.
Yeah, we can assist with that in terms of providing the forms and some direction.
Okay, I'm not sure I need it yet, but I just wanted to make sure we understand what to do.
We do.
So I just want to raise in the short period we have left, I want to make sure that there are a few things that folks understand because they're common misconceptions. And this first one came up earlier, so I want to reiterate it. The disclosure is not always coextensive with this qualification. And there are a couple of times that comes up. So you are disclosing this coming April, the financial interest you held during calendar year 2020. But you need to disqualify based on any financial interest that you currently hold or in some circumstances, say income that you held within the prior 12 calendar months. So if you received income from somebody in February of this year and some decision that you're going to make could have a financial impact on that individual, you still have to disqualify this year, even though you're not disclosing it until next year. We talked about the personal residence, and for the most part, you're not going to disclose your personal residence, but your personal residence is always a potential source of a conflict. So if you are making a decision that could have a material financial impact on your personal residence, then you might have to disqualify from that decision, even if you didn't have to disclose that residence. And I think we touched on this a little bit too, and it is confusing, but for businesses, if you own 10% or more, you disclose if your pro rata share of income is $10,000 or more, but you have to disqualify if your pro rata share of income is $500 or more. So somebody who is a source of $600 of income to that business could result in disqualification to you, even though you didn't have to disclose them on your Form 700. There are some specific rules when it comes to disclosing assets or income from your spouse, your domestic partner, or your dependent children. So for income and gifts, you're going to report your community property interest in a gift or income that goes to your spouse. For real property, you're going to report the full value of the property, not just your community property interest in that property, but the community property interest in any income derived from that property. Similarly, with business investments, you're going to report the full value of the investment, but your community property share of any income from that investment. For business positions, you only have to report your own business positions. You don't have to report business positions held by your spouse or dependent children or domestic partner. And again, I want to reiterate that if you have questions about blind trusts, separate property agreements, limited liability partnerships, or anything complicated like that, we really urge you to seek advice of counsel when you're filling out your form. And then the next slide, please. So there are resources out there for you. And the first one is your counsel here at LACERA. They're very good. They're very knowledgeable. They can reach out to us as your fiduciary counsel, and you can reach out to us as fiduciary counsel. The FPPC has a very good website, which has the full Political Reform Act and all the regulations on it. They also have on there the Form 700 and the form instructions. And I do urge you to look at the form instructions because sometimes they are helpful. Sometimes they're confusing, I agree, but they do give you some guidance in filling out the form. There's also something called a reference pamphlet that they publish that gives you some additional guidance. It defines terms that are used in the Form 700. They also have some frequently asked questions on their website. The FPPC does issue opinions and advice letters. If there's a complicated question and you write in and you disclose all the material facts and you get advice and you follow that advice, then you are immune from prosecution by the FPPC. It is very important that the advice letter be written in a way that you assure that all the material facts are disclosed. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you think it might be appropriate to write for advice, we urge you to consult with your counsel on the best way to do that. If there are simple questions, however, there is a telephone advice line and an email advice line that you can use for, but we again urge you to use that only for very simple questions and really consult with your LACERA counsel whenever possible. And with that, if there are any other general questions, we're happy to consider them.
Sure, very good presentation. Thank you. I have Ms. Sanchez in the queue.
Thank you. I have one last question, Ms. Getman. On the slide 17, potential traps for the unwary. It said on the bottom of the second item, business positions, you only report your own business positions. And now, did that also, I'm just getting confused. Does that also expand to, for example, investments that are held in my spouse's separate investment account, which is separate from our commingled joint account?
That's the kind of complex question that I urge you to take outside context.
I got confused.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you both very much. It was very informative.
Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate the information. And again, you know, trustees are certainly free to follow up individually with their specific questions with counsel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Time check. We'll take a break right before we go into exec session. Items C through J are information only. I have not received any requests to poll or any questions. Are there any questions from trustees before we move on? Hearing none, seeing none, we are on to items for staff review. Linda, are there any items for staff review?
Yes, I have two items. The first one is the board requested for staff to address questions pertaining to Form 700 training. Second item is the board requested for staff to address member communication on how to encourage members to add on email addresses on their LACERA profile, as well as providing information when one is not available.
Thank you. Good of the order. Linda, can you please call on everyone?
Absolutely. We'll start off with Mr. Green.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Mr. Santos.
It's a wonderful day in California. It's raining. It's raining since last night. So I grew up rain for a couple more days. We need the water. I'm doing a lot of dancing so we can get more rain. Have a good day.
Thank you. Mr. Kehoe.
Just recognize that this is a social work month, so appreciate David Green's service to the community.
Thank you. Ms. Greenwood.
I've got nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oakham.
Yeah, I now made very nervous. I just called my secretary and said, I've got a form for you to make sure we're filling out the 700 correctly, and we need to call Steve Rice. The only other thing I have, which I'm not sure if anybody knows, I'm leaving the Board of Investments. And there is going to be a replacement next month by the name of Patrick Jones, who I've met and is an outstanding young man. He's a CPA, and you'll find all, I don't remember his whole background, but he's an investment individual who I think will make a great replacement for me. I'm going to be 80 years old in May, and I think it's about time that that I look at retirement. So this will be my last year on the board of retirement. So I want to thank everybody for their great input over the years. It was very nice. I mean, I'm going to see most of you at the board of retirement, and I'm sure I'm going to see the rest of you at the joint meeting. So thank you for your support. I'd like to thank the staff. We have an incredible staff, as I tell everybody, all my friends who are getting retirements and ask me how we're doing. I say we're doing fantastic with our investment staff on both sides of the room. So thank you again, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the other meetings.
Thank you. Mr. Bernstein?
Well, I was going to go with a light, happy social work month and happy social work month, David. But in light of Mr. Oakham's announcement, I just want to express my appreciation for his years of service, my sadness at losing him here, my gratitude as chair of the board of retirement that we will keep him, and we have Mr. Moore that, from my perspective, you all are invited over there anytime you care to join us. But I welcome Mr. Jones, but I really thank Mr. Oakham, and his contributions have been tremendous and very much appreciated.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
I'm sad by Ron's announcement. I've told Ron himself, he's kind of the Warren Christopher, the elder statesman of our group. And I've always appreciated that about him. I received my first dose of vaccine on Monday afternoon. Kaiser's opened it up to new populations, and I filled out the form, and I got an appointment within 30 minutes. And I feel better today than I did yesterday. But I'm happy. I'm happy I'm halfway there. And acknowledging Social Work Month, but also we have to acknowledge this is the month for the celebration of St. Patrick's Day, the patron saint of Ireland. So in the spirit of St. Patrick's Day, I will share, it ain't over till it's clover. You shamrock my world, and you're beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez?
So I'll echo, Ron, you have been a constant source of entertainment and enlightenment. And, at times, you've irked me to death, but I love you on the whole. So I'm honest, what can I say? But thank you for your service. And I am heartfelt in saying that I have always believed that you do things for the right reasons. So just thanks for that. And I want to also thank Mr. Rice for getting our Form 700 training, which I've been rattling for years. And I have to say that along with Ron, I'm also scratching my head saying, I want to make sure I understand that correctly. So you'll probably expect individual appointments from all of us following this, but I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to Stephen McCourt.
Great. Thanks, Linda. I just want to highlight one quick item just as it relates to the asset allocation study that we're continuing to move forward with. Great questions today on different types of risks to evaluate with respect to the study. We encourage the board to continue to press us and staff to look at investments from different perspectives, different lenses, push us in this process. The more you challenge us, I think the better the outcome for all of you. And I can't help myself but to comment on the markets. We're all very thankful that the markets keep going up. But I think as we're all aware, the behavior in the markets over the last several months has been unusual in lots of ways. So I don't think any of us knows exactly what that means at this moment in time, but it's just worth bearing in mind as we set forth a strategic investment plan for the fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Leo Festina.
Thank you. 1 year coming in pretty much into the lockdown of the pandemic, with many of us still working remotely. We managed to adjust. We're very resilient. We'll get through whatever we're facing in the future. So I'm very confident that we'll get through this very well. And I look forward to the next meeting, which will begin what we've been waiting for a few meetings now, which is the real discussion on asset allocation, which will be very important for LACERA to meet its goals in the future. So look forward to seeing you in the future, hopefully sometime this year. I miss you.
Thank you. Next, Tim Filla.
I have nothing to add to those comments. Thank you.
Thank you. John Grable.
Yes, first, I'm going to miss working with Mr. Oakham. I've enjoyed all our interaction, and on behalf of staff, thank you, Ron, Mr. Oakham, for everything. The other thing that I will mention is everyone on this call is committed to working diligently hard for all of LACERA members to retire with confidence, to retire with surety and with dignity. And if Trina Sanders can turn on her camera, Trina's been working 29 years towards that end. Today is Trina's last board meeting. Once again, she's been at LACERA working 29 years to help all our members to, once again, to retire with confidence. And this is Trina's last meeting. So now it's all of our turn, and it's my turn to work for Trina. So beginning the end of this month, I expect Trina to call me up, to complain, push me, to do everything I can for her and all LACERA retirees. So congratulations, Trina. Thank you for everything, and you will be missed.
Thank you. Next, we will call on Santos Cramen.
Yes, hi, thank you. I just wanted to congratulate Trina for a wonderful career, nearly 30 years. So I'm looking forward to joining you one day and giving John a hard time and calling him and complaining and telling him trying to push him to do his best. But I also wanted to just say to Mr. Oakham, thank you for your service as well. I actually have the benefit now of having you all to myself and working with you on the Board of Retirement side. So I'm looking forward to our continued partnership and collaboration on the pension side. So with that, that's all I really had to say. So thank you all for your continued efforts on behalf of our members.
Thank you. Stephen Rice.
Yes, first off, just my appreciation, Mr. Oakham, for the opportunity to work with you on the Board of Investment side. I'm glad it's continuing on the Board of Retirement side, but it's been a pleasure in connection with investment issues. And second, and finally, just in terms of the Form 700 issues, Joe Rowell and I, either of us or both of us, welcome your calls and emails during the next 3 weeks as you wrap up the Form 700s for the 2020 reporting year. April 1st is the date. We're available and we look forward to hearing from you. And of course, feel free to connect again with Karen and Kelly directly, and we can also facilitate that.
Thank you. Last but not least, Chair Knox.
Thank you. I was going to say, at least for Form 700, the pandemic certainly reduced any reportable meals that otherwise we would have had to keep track of. Congratulations, Trina, on a much-deserved retirement. Certainly appreciate your service to LACERA for 29 years. That's impressive. To Mr. Oakham, thank you for your partnership on BOI and your friendship. You are somebody that is keenly aware of any other person that's in the San Gabriel Valley. It always amazes me how many people you know. So thank you for your service. And then lastly, I wanted to congratulate David Green on becoming the Vice President of SEIU Local 721. That's a very notable accomplishment, and certainly wanted to extend my congratulations there. So with that, I will ask Linda to prep us for executive session. We'll probably take, what, a 10-minute break, come back at 12:40. Does that work for everybody? Let's do it.